The city was abuzz as soon as word spread that he was here. People rushing out of their seats, whispering to each other, trying to find out more. As soon as he approached, the guard instantly stopped him and began checking his pass. The guard glanced at him suspiciously. The atmosphere tensed. He stared intently, trying to figure out if this was really the same Raymond from the founder's family. At first glance, it was definitely him, but something was wrong, as if he was a completely different person. His body was almost completely wrapped in bandages, and his eyes were empty, as if he had seen death itself. His clothes hung in tatters, all torn, as if he had just escaped from hell. The guards couldn't decide for a long time, but after checking his documents, they still let him pass. Raymond walked forward, but behind him a murmur of reserved, wary whispers was already rising. Everyone recognized him at first sight, but no one could understand why he looked as if he had survived the end of the world. The aristocrat's appearance shocked everyone. His haggard face and general condition caused surprise and alarm. This gave rise to many rumors and speculations, because it was hard to believe that a representative of the once influential founding family could find himself in such a miserable state. Rumors were spreading in the city that the White Tower was actively recruiting mercenaries to carry out unknown tasks. The presence of the aristocrat in this place caused sincere surprise. No one could understand what could have forced him to join such a cause. Hearing these discussions, he only smiled faintly, without saying a word. Too many questions, too little understanding. Soon he reached the very heart of Camelot, the majestic and bustling city center, where history, gossip, and the glances of passers-by intertwined. And after some time, he reached the magical tower of a majestic building that towered over the city, within the walls of which were housed all the kingdom's guards and concentrated the power capable of changing the course of events. He was overcome with conflicting emotions of excitement, pride, and relief, for he had worked so hard, overcoming obstacles and the pain of the past, just to be here. He chose this difficult path to prevent the decline of his family and to preserve the honor of the family name, which was losing its former greatness and respect more and more every year. After all, he saw with his own eyes the real hell of war, which took the lives of thousands, leaving behind only pain, devastation, and the shadows of the dead. Seeing his own father die in a brutal battle against the Empire, he forever remembered that moment, the scream, the blood, and the look. Together with their mother, they had to hastily flee their native castle, leaving behind the ruins of their former life, luxury, and memories that would never return. No matter what happened, he had to get to the Magic Tower. It was his only chance to reclaim his lost lands, restore his family's honor, and right the injustices of the past. All he had left from his parents was his mother's silver ring, tarnished by time, but dear to his heart. But all of his dreams and plans often seemed unattainable and illusory to him, like a fragile echo that could dissipate at any moment. After all, literally immediately after entering the academy, he was unexpectedly expelled, and this was a heavy blow for him. He was already a few steps from the entrance to the Magic Tower, literally just a few steps away from crossing the threshold that could change his fate forever. He received 3 bad grades, a first in the history of the academy, and this immediately raised doubts about his future. He could only recall all the combat theory he had studied, every move, every tactical piece of advice he had once learned. But for the next stage of the fight, he no longer had the strength, the time, or even the slightest chance to prepare. It would have been difficult for him to withstand the condemnation of his comrades, so he was advised to consider another professional path. These words deeply wounded him. His judgment of the living was his most vulnerable spot, so such criticism struck straight to the heart. Because his living mana was naturally thin and weak, he could not take in large amounts of energy, which limited his capabilities. But he couldn't release mana in unlimited quantities either. It was the most severe punishment a true mage could suffer, but he was incredibly lucky. Thanks to his experience as a mercenary, he was able to make it to the second round, overcoming all the difficulties on the way. However, he was still considered a third-rate wizard, and he would have a long time to prove his true power. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by the sharp creak of a door that suddenly opened, breaking him out of his deep thoughts. One of the head guards came out of the door and announced that today's registration for temporary work was already complete. All the mercenaries who came to this place today were extremely indignant. They had waited for half a day, some even much longer, and now their hopes were in jeopardy. They were completely confused and in despair, did not understand where to go now and what steps to take, because all their expectations and plans were suddenly under threat. Suddenly, one of them accidentally mentioned a museum that temporarily invited magicians to its premises. This caused a slight surge of hope among those present, because this could be a new chance and an opportunity to change their fate. But out of pride, no one wanted to go there, because the museum only hired cleaners from the first round, and it seemed humiliating to them. For each of them, it was a deep humiliation and a real shame that was difficult to accept. The idea of working in such a position caused them despair and contempt for their own dignity. However, Raymond no longer had any choice. He was forced to accept even the lowest role. He sighed heavily, overcome with doubt and uncertainty, not knowing which path to choose and what to do next in this difficult situation. Suddenly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bag that lay heavy in his palm, as if hiding the secret of his past. There was one gold coin in the bag, like a reminder that even for this small, part-time job, he was ready to fight and not give up. He was aware of his difficult situation and therefore did not dare to go to the Great Louvre Museum, a place that demanded more than he could give at that moment. But after some time, he was already being instructed on how to work at the museum, introducing him to the rules and responsibilities he was supposed to fulfill. This museum was the largest and most famous in the entire kingdom, a true pearl that preserved priceless artifacts and secrets of the past. This week, aristocrats were to move into the museum, so all the rooms needed to be brought to a perfect cleanliness and shine to make the right impression on them. Raymond didn't like this job very much. It humiliated his pride and didn't meet his ambitions, but he simply had no choice. They were also warned to control their magical power while cleaning, as any damage or breakage would be considered their responsibility. They were warned that every decision, every step, every slightest influence on the exhibits was not just a game or a demonstration, but a real responsibility. They had to be ready to take full responsibility for any consequences of their work, because even the smallest mistake could lead to unpredictable and catastrophic consequences. These words echoed in his mind like an invisible burden, reminding him there was no room for frivolity here. However, despite this, Raymond immediately felt a deep inner doubt. Something was wrong with this situation. His attentive gaze noticed that some of the exhibits looked artificial, as if they had been faked or designed to create the illusion of authenticity. This made him think. Perhaps he was over-dramatizing the events, giving them excessive weight, while in reality it was just a facade, a game behind which something more mundane was hidden. Confused and intrigued at the same time, Raymond began to look around carefully. His eyes, step by step, explored every corner of the museum, every exhibit, every little thing that could reveal the secrets of this place. It was as if he was looking for invisible threads that could lead him to the truth, to solve the mysteries that lay behind these walls. His mind and heart worked in unison, trying to catch any hints that could shed light on the situation. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a door that was dramatically different from all the others around it. It had a different texture, color, and even a different sound as he approached. It seemed mysterious, as if it hid something extremely important and dangerous behind it. Something that could change everything he knew up to that point. He began to examine the door closely, trying to remember if this place was familiar to him. The feeling of familiarity was strong, as if he had been here before or seen something like it in the past. The memory was vague, but vivid enough to make his heart beat faster and his mind search for answers. Behind the door opened the Hall of Fantastic Creatures, a special place that seemed to be made of dreams and legends. There were amazing exhibits here that told the story of incomprehensible creatures that once inhabited this world or could exist in parallel dimensions. It was a space where fantasy and reality intertwined, revealing secrets that captured the imagination of everyone who stepped here. This place seemed to him unusually familiar for a reason. He had seen similar creatures in a past life, perhaps even encountered them face to face. These ancient memories awakened deep emotions in him. A mixture of admiration, fear, and a mysterious nostalgia that touched the most secret strings of the soul. Suddenly, he felt a strange rustling in his pocket that seemed unnatural to him. It was a faint but insistent sound, as if something invisible was stirring and trying to get his attention. His body tensed, and his mind focused on this unexpected signal. With each passing second, the rustling grew louder and more insistent, like the voice of a shadow calling him into the depths of mystery. The sound seemed to warn of approaching danger or a hidden power lurking nearby. In his pocket lay a ring, a special artifact, a gift from his mother that held immense meaning for him. He had never before felt the ring react in any way to the world around him, so now this strange vibration caused him deep surprise and anxiety. Carefully removing the ring, he began to examine it closely, trying to unravel the nature of this phenomenon. He looked for patterns, symbols, or hidden inscriptions that could explain the strange vibrations and open up new horizons of understanding before him. Staring at the ring with all his vigilance, Raymond tried to penetrate the essence of the mystery hidden behind this simple yet mysterious object. His thoughts wandered between doubt and faith, between fear and hope. As soon as he focused on the ring, he felt a powerful, invisible pull that seemed to pull him into the hall of fantastic creatures. This was no coincidence. The ring seemed to call him, to lure him to itself, hiding within itself an ancient secret that was waiting for its seeker, for someone who could reveal it. This place attracted him, fascinated him, and beckoned him, though he could not yet explain why he was so irresistibly drawn to it. The feeling was both exciting and unsettling, as if he were standing on the threshold of a great discovery that could change his life forever. His feet, as if they had a will of their own, began to move forward, step by step, as if guided by an invisible force. He could not stop this movement, and each step took him further away from the familiar and closer to the unknown. It was as if the very fate that had woven his path was pulling him towards this hall, leading him to where he was meant to be, even if he didn't realize it yet. Fear and doubt tried to hold him back, but faith and an inner voice were stronger. When he stepped into the room, a huge statue immediately caught his eye. A large dragon made of bones, silently gazing out into space, reminding him of ancient legends and the forgotten, powerful force that once reigned here. With each step towards the statue, the vibration in the ring intensified, as if it was responding to the presence of this symbol and trying to reveal even more secrets. Raymond could not understand what the ring was trying to tell him, so he silently turned to his mother in his thoughts, seeking her help and support in this mysterious and dangerous situation. Closing his eyes, he was filled with hope and faith that she would be able to guide him through this darkness of the unknown, show him the right path, and give him the strength to accept the test. And now, before his closed eyes, that very day from childhood came to life, when they stood together near that dragon, and memories returned with incredible clarity. Children's laughter, his mother's stories, her warm words that remained in his heart for the rest of his life. Mom led him on an exciting tour, and Raymond felt joy and happiness that overflowed his little heart, filling him with love and faith in miracles. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to strange sounds coming softly from the wall behind him, as if someone or something was hiding there, watching him and waiting for its time to appear and change everything forever. These sounds were quiet, but they were alarming, filling the atmosphere with tension and a sense of the unknown. He pointed his finger at his mother in that direction and asked what those sounds were, trying to understand what was hidden behind the wall. But he never heard an answer from his mother. She only nodded silently, after which they quickly left the place, leaving the mystery behind. Raymond opened his eyes sharply, coming back from deep memories to reality. But the sense of mystery still remained with him. Immediately after that, his heart pounding, he moved towards the same corner that had previously attracted his attention. It was there that the mysterious sound was heard, causing him both anxiety and an unknown attraction. Every step towards this place was filled with anticipation, as if he were approaching something not just important, but a truly fateful event that could turn his life upside down. Around that corner, he came across an amazing and at the same time terrifying sight. The heart of the ancient dragon, which, despite its stone shell, vibrated with a living, almost tangible force. This place was full of mysterious magic, which flowed through every crack, through every dust of stones. It radiated such a powerful energy that it seemed capable of changing not only his own fate, but also the course of history of the entire kingdom. Legends, forgotten secrets, and magic of ancient times were intertwined here. Suddenly, the ring he held in his hands began to vibrate wildly, as if responding to the proximity of this source of powerful power. Its cold metal seemed to come alive, responding to the presence of this ancient magic radiating from the dragon's heart. The vibrations grew stronger, making his hands tremble and his thoughts spin faster than ever before. An incredible sight opened before his eyes. The true heart of a dragon, huge and impressive, with a powerful magical aura enveloping it from all sides. The ring he held suddenly resembled a huge eye, bright, burning, as if it were directly connected to this ancient creature. It seemed that there was an invisible connection between them, stronger than any chains of time. But suddenly, as he put the ring on his finger, he heard a soft, barely perceptible cry coming from somewhere nearby. The sound was unexpectedly emotional, like the voice of an ancient soul that had suffered in silence for years. The cry pierced his heart to the depths, causing an inexplicable feeling of sadness and pain, forcing him to seek an answer to the question of why someone, or something, was so sad here. Raymond wondered why he had been brought here, what the significance of this cry was, and what role he would have to play in this mysterious, perhaps fateful, story. His mind tried to grasp at any thread that might unravel the mystery, but the answers remained hidden behind a veil of obscurity. Suddenly, the ring's vibration abruptly died away, leaving behind a deep, weighty silence that seemed even heavier than the sounds themselves. This silence was like an oath, like a signal of the completion of a certain cycle. As if some invisible force had finished its mysterious message, and now the moment had come when everything depended on its decision. Unexpectedly, the ring trembled again, but much more strongly. The vibrations spread around, penetrating the air, the earth, and everything around, causing every leaf, every stone to tremble, and even the air itself seemed saturated with invisible energy. This magical resonance put all living things around on their ears, as if the dragon's very heart had awakened after a long sleep. The dragon statue stood silent and unwavering, seemingly cold and lifeless. But anyone with experience and intuition felt that within its heart of stone still slumbered the incredible power of a true beast. A power that could once have changed the course of centuries. Raymond froze, feeling the faint vibrations that permeated the air and the earth, as if nature itself were speaking to him through this ancient artifact. His mind struggled to find a rational explanation, but his body and soul felt much more. Something that was difficult to describe in words. He thought that perhaps he was just fooling himself, trying to find logic in what he was feeling. His mind refused to accept what his instincts suggested, because it seemed too fantastical to him, like something out of a fairy tale. He tried to calm himself down, telling himself that it was all just a play on his imagination, and that reality couldn't be that extraordinary. But the feeling still wouldn't let go, and his soul yearned to believe in what was happening. Suddenly, the ring began to fill with power, as if struck by lightning. A bright light shone from within, pulsing with living energy that spread around it, as if ancient magic was awakening after millennia of slumber. The heart and the eye, two symbols that had previously existed separately, finally merged into one, forming a strong bond between the soul and visual perception. This union opened up access to the third eye, a source of truth hidden from the gaze of ordinary mortals. A huge dragon suddenly burst out from the middle of the ring. Its wings spread with incredible power, and its body was enveloped in blazing flames that seemed to be a living element. The fire danced around it, creating an aura of power that took the breath away and made the heart beat faster. The dragon spoke in a deep, powerful voice that echoed in every corner of the room, as if magic itself were speaking through him. He announced that Raymond would be the first brick in the foundation of a new mythology, the beginning of a great legend that would change the world forever. His path would be difficult, but the world would not forget this story. It was a sign of the beginning of a new era, and Raymond could no longer go back. And the dragon gave Raymond a second chance, a unique opportunity to right past wrongs and become a defender of magic that would bring a bright new era. And at that moment he realized the mechanism that governed this world had broken down, and the long-awaited fate had finally arrived, opening a new era of change and opportunity. Suddenly, Raymond began to distinguish a familiar voice, which seemed to come from afar, but at the same time was loud and close, like the voice he had been searching for a long time, and which could change everything. Before he could realize where he was, Raymond suddenly felt a sharp blow to the head. He was hit by a heavy book, forcing him to come to his senses in a moment of surprise. After the impact, he jumped to his feet sharply, his heart pounding with surprise, and his mind unable to comprehend what exactly had happened and where he had ended up. But in front of him stood the professor, who noted with a smile that Raymond's grades were good, but sleeping in class was too much. But Raymond was completely confused. He couldn't understand what was happening or where he was at all. Suddenly, a familiar trait flashed in the man, and Raymond remembered Professor Hubert, the same mentor who had repeatedly tried to keep him on the right path. But something else was clearly stored in his memory. Professor Hubert had long since died, and this meeting seemed impossible, as if he were seeing a ghost from the past. He looked around nervously, trying to figure out where he was, and peered intently into the faces of the students, searching for some clue or familiar sign in this unfamiliar crowd. He couldn't believe his eyes. Everything around him seemed both familiar and strange. as if reality had mixed with illusion, leaving him in complete amazement. After all his friends, comrades, and even those who once mocked him were here, as if time had turned back and the past came to life around him in one space. Jumping sharply to his feet, he began to carefully examine himself, trying to figure out whether this was his real body or whether he had found himself in some strange illusion or dream. After that, he nervously ran his hands over his face, trying to make sure of the reality of what he was feeling and find at least some certainty in this chaos of incomprehensible events. A shiver suddenly ran through his body, and cold sweat began to appear on his skin. Nervous tension gripped him completely, leaving him no peace. After all, it finally dawned on him. He found himself in the past, in a world where time had turned back, and all his memories had come to life with new force. The sun was shining brightly outside, and a quiet calm reigned around him. These familiar walls surrounding him filled his heart with warmth and awakened long-forgotten memories. The same students, the same windows, the same professor, everything around seemed extremely familiar, as if he had returned in time to his own past. But Raymond still couldn't believe that he was really in the past. His mind refused to accept this incredible reality, and his heart beat with uncertainty and doubt. After that, he slowly turned around and froze, looking straight at the professor, trying to read in his eyes at least some answer to his numerous questions. But the professor just sighed and said that this was not the Raymond he knew at all. So he decided to punish him to get him back on the right path. After these words, the professor pointed sternly at the door and kicked him out of the office, leaving Raymond alone with his confusion and doubts. After that, he took his first steps forward, overcome with mixed feelings of admiration and incomprehension, because he still found it hard to believe that this was real time travel. What kind of magic this could be and how this phenomenon could even be explained or named remained a mystery that tormented his mind and gave him no peace. But the dragon's words would not leave his head, repeating themselves over and over again, like a mysterious mantra calling him to fulfill his great destiny. The image of the dragon never left his thoughts, causing a mixed feeling of surprise and anxiety, because he could never understand what was really happening. But one thing was clear. This was his second chance at a full life, an opportunity to change everything and write a new story of his destiny. Perhaps this time he will be able to do everything right, correct the mistakes of the past, or at least change something important for the better. He felt that this was most likely a second chance, a gift from his mother, who invisibly supported him even from afar, leading him through trials and darkness. But suddenly, from the depths of his thoughts, the professor's voice broke him, calling him back to reality, forcing him to distract himself from his own thoughts. It was strange to him that Russell had fallen asleep earlier. This had never happened before, and it made him a little surprised and worried. But the professor would not hear anything, insisting on talking alone, and ordered Russell to come to his office during lunch. The professor added that he would be waiting for him, and emphasized that the conversation was very important, so Russell should not miss this meeting. Russell was filled with a strange feeling. It had been a long time since he had found himself in such situations, and although it caused him a slight anxiety, at the same time, it could not be said that he did not like it. He watched the professor with a slight smile, his gaze slowly receding, feeling a mixture of curiosity and impatience for the upcoming conversation. But suddenly, someone unexpectedly hit him on the head, and the world around him instantly spun, causing him to lose his balance. He didn't even have time to understand who it was and instantly turned around sharply, peering intently into the surrounding space in search of the source of the blow. Seeing the three boys behind him, he instantly recognized them as the ones who had teased him so many times before. And now, their faces again evoked in him a mixture of fear and irritation. One of them began to call him names, rudely, and then raised his hand angrily, as if preparing to strike another blow. But another of the boys held his hand, stopping the attack, preventing him from striking, and thereby momentarily diffused the tense situation. After all, the professors were standing nearby, watching everything closely, and their stern gaze could instantly end any conflict. After that, he stated in an exalted tone, with a claim that Raymond still had not given him a synopsis, emphasizing his dissatisfaction. But suddenly, everything seemed to fall into place, and all doubts and misunderstandings disappeared, leaving Raymond with clarity in his mind. After all, it was the very one who had been constantly threatening him, and now all the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. After that, they moved forward, leaving behind a tense situation that gradually began to dissipate. He only smiled nervously, remembering that something like this had happened to him before, and although it had caused him discomfort, he was much calmer about it now. Suddenly, a message arrived on his phone that instantly caught his attention, making his heart beat faster. The message said he should stop class for classmates who were bullying him, a call that made him think about how to proceed. He couldn't figure out what the message was, At first, he thought it was just an illusion or someone's joke, but it remained on the screen, filled with a mysterious meaning. At first, he wasn't even sure if it was a real message or just a figment of his imagination playing out at the most intense moment. However, when his finger touched the cold, almost transparent screen, he felt a slight vibration that seemed to confirm the reality of this digital sign. It was not an illusion or a ghost. It was a real, undeniable message that brought him out of the shadow of uncertainty and made his heart beat faster. At that very moment, loud screams rang out ahead, loud and alarming, breaking the silence and forcing him to move faster. These screams carried panic and hinted that time was beginning to tick relentlessly, every second measuring the chance of success or failure. Like the academy itself, the space around became more acute, tense, and seemed to breathe danger. One of the voices, echoing with pressure, repeated that it was useless to run, because they found themselves inside the vast labyrinth of the academy, where escape was almost impossible. These words were like a cold shower, reminding them that the walls around them were not only physical, but also magical, filled with spells and traps capable of stopping even the most agile escapee. However, even in this hopeless situation, when all around seemed to be only darkness and threat, he knew that if he got scared and gave up, hope would finally fade away. But sometimes even the smallest spark of light in a sea of darkness gives incredible power, capable of igniting the fight again and again, not letting him give up. Raymond, though under pressure, was filled with unwavering determination. In his chest burned a fire of irresistible faith in his own strength, a desire to change not only this mission, but his entire life forever. He felt that this battle was not just a test, it was a chance to become different, stronger, better prepared for any adversity. However, it was not only cold calculation that guided him at that moment. Behind him stood a burning desire for revenge. Revenge for all those insults and humiliations that had long settled deep in his heart, that had poisoned his soul for years, intensified his pain, and made him more determined in his desire to prove his worth to everyone. His determination was as strong as a brick. He wanted to show those who had once laughed at him and despised him that they were wrong. He wanted to prove what he was truly capable of, and that underestimation could cost those who dared to despise him dearly. After all, after several years of living among real dangers, with monsters, murderers, and deadly traps, Raymond had learned to distinguish childish pranks from real threats. What now seems difficult was just a game, entertainment, compared to the burning desire for blood and death that he felt on the real battlefield. He knew that all those childhood abuses he had endured within the walls of the academy were mere trifles, shadows compared to the horror and cruelty that lay ahead. And even in that moment, he did not allow himself to forget how much stronger he had become through those trials. These boys who despised and insulted him only wanted to play, to use him as a means of their own self-expression and demonstration of strength, not realizing that in reality, they were faced with a man who had gone through fire and water, and whose spirit could not be broken. But suddenly one of them shouted sharply, seeking to attract attention and challenge Raymond to open conflict. His voice was sharp and provocative, as if he were calling for a duel, leaving no room for fear or doubt. In response to these rude, impudent words, Raymond did not hold back. He responded with no less impudence and determination, ready to defend his dignity at any cost, not allowing anyone to humiliate him. He slowly, confidently began to move forward, his steps sounding confident and determined. Behind him, the three boys only shrugged their shoulders, considering him completely crazy. A man devoid of common sense, who dared to defy all the rules and their authority. Raymond resolutely approached one of them, not hiding his challenge. His eyes were burning with inner fire, and his body was ready for any development of events. He was not going to back down. Without wasting a second, he decided to act first, without waiting for the opponent to make the first move. This was his moment. The moment when the initiative was on his side. His aimed blow flew past, missing its target, but that was just the beginning. He was sending a signal that he was ready to fight, and that his every move was calculated and dangerous. Their gazes suddenly met, as if an invisible thread had connected them for a moment, reflecting all the tension and charge of the struggle between the two enemies. After gathering himself for a few seconds, Raymond sharply struck his opponent in the stomach, causing pain that forced him to lower his head and lose his balance. Suddenly, that opponent fainted and fell to the ground, losing consciousness from the unexpected and powerful blow. The second guy in the company was stunned and confused by what he saw. It all happened so quickly and unexpectedly that he didn't even have time to comprehend what had happened. He burst into a scream, full of rage and desire for revenge, shouting loudly at Raymond, ready to rush into the attack to restore his own honor and prove who the real master is here. He didn't even have time to blink an eye when he received a powerful blow directly to the face, a blow that exploded with force and threw him back. His body flew several meters away, as if from an explosion, and he, dazed and stunned, could barely find the strength to get up. The most important among them, the leader, who watched all this with profound astonishment and shock, could not believe that Raymond had managed to break their order so quickly and confidently. He concluded that if Raymond didn't use magic, he probably just mastered some cheap and primitive fighting tricks that didn't pose a serious threat. However, it suddenly occurred to the leader that Raymond was an orphan from a disgraced family, whose status and origin gave him an additional burden and caused others to treat him with contempt and suspicion. Moreover, the use of full-fledged magic within the academic walls was strictly prohibited and punishable by the greatest punishments. However, this prohibition did not apply to the use of small artifacts, such as the one hidden in the hand of one of them, which were allowed to be used even within the walls of the academy, which gave them a sense of impunity and confidence in their own unconditional power. That is why he decided to act meanly and unexpectedly, attacking Raymond using a small, almost invisible artifact, a cunning tool hidden from view, which could deal a devastating blow if used at the right moment. This artifact was not just a weapon, but a symbol of the cunning and desperation of its owner, the last hope to turn the tide of the battle in his favor. But Raymond stood as if he were standing in the very center of the storm, completely calm and fearless, silently awaiting the blow, making no movement, as if he were confident of his invincibility. His gaze was cold and composed, and his body was composed and ready for any development of events. When the fist of his opponent, filled with malice and hatred, finally approached, Raymond easily, almost with a feeling of slight discomfort, stopped it, as if it were a child's toy and not a weapon of death. His hand was strong, unwavering, and at that moment, a power awakened in him that surpassed anything he had felt before. Giving his enemy no chance of escape, he began to squeeze his opponent's hand tightly, slowly but surely, as if with iron pincers, squeezing every muscle, every nerve. The strength in his fingers grew, and the pain in Frederick's eyes became more and more unbearable. Gradually, the opponent's arm began to break. The bones seemed to crack and burst under the incredible pressure, emitting an eerie, frightening crunch, a sound that seemed to pierce the entire room and leave everyone present in a state of shock. The pain became so unbearable for Frederick that he could barely stand on his feet. Suddenly, a shrill, desperate cry burst from his throat, a cry of pain, helplessness, and terror, so sharp it seemed to split the air in two. This cry was the enemy's last attempt to resist, but it was already futile. Feeling his strength leaving him, Frederick fainted and, barely able to stand, fell to his knees, like a soldier who has been wounded and can no longer fight. His body trembled with pain, and his eyes closed, unable to bear it any longer. Everyone around him knew that this very morning he had suffered a humiliation that even his own family could not erase. His blood brothers, losing faith in him, had degraded him in their eyes, branding him a failure and a disgrace. The family that should have been his support had turned away, considering him weak and unworthy. After all, in this world, if your opponent is strong, he behaves with respect, tact, and caution. If he is weak, he resorts to insults, humiliation, and contempt, trying to intimidate and break your spirit. And that is exactly how Frederick behaved. Lacking strength, he chose the path of humiliation. Raymond couldn't allow a loser like Frederick to dare insult his own family, the people he loved and valued above all else. It was a line he wasn't willing to cross, even in the most difficult of times. He especially wouldn't allow him to mention his mother in a derogatory tone. After all, her image was sacred to him, a source of strength and inspiration that sustained him in his darkest moments. Suddenly, Raymond's expression changed dramatically. The cold calm gave way to tense, heavy breathing. His body seemed to be filled with discomfort that pressed from within, warning him of the overwhelming threat emanating from this encounter. He felt that something incredibly serious and dangerous was coming from him, something that could change the course of events. Seized by cold fear, Frederick began to beg Raymond to stop, asking for mercy, but not just with words. He wanted to be heard, to understand every word, every thought. He lacked not only strength, but also respect, so he tried to awaken sympathy in Raymond, to evoke at least the slightest understanding that could save him from final collapse. But Raymond would not listen to anyone. He rejected all words and pleas, and without hesitation, he tore through the three of them, like a storm that sweeps away everything in its path. It was not just an escape, it was an act of liberation from the burdens of the past that still suffocated him. After all, throughout his time at the academy, he had been mercilessly mocked, humiliated, and despised. And now the same people who had been his tormentors stood before him, begging for mercy. And it turned his world upside down. Raymond pushed them away, ignoring their words, and simply walked away without looking back. He felt he was walking from pain, humiliation, and fear to freedom, though he did not know what lay ahead. After walking a few meters, he sat down wordlessly by one of the large logs, feeling all his emotions and experiences rushing in at once. He bowed his head as if he wanted to hide from the whole world and gather his strength a little, but doubts haunted him. He began to worry whether he had gone too far in his punishment of those who had wronged him. Had he become like those he had feared and hated for so long? He sighed heavily, feeling as if he had lifted a huge burden from his shoulders, but at the same time understanding that this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. There were many more battles ahead, both external and internal. Suddenly, the same bright screen with a message appeared before his eyes again, a reward that reminded him that every sacrifice and every effort has its price and its recognition. A small red pebble suddenly flew out of the screen, shimmering and burning like a small flame, holding within itself immense power and mystery. It glowed as if alive, pulsating and beckoning. This award was a natural result of his hard work on the mission, a small but significant sign that he was moving in the right direction, and that more challenges and discoveries lay ahead. He couldn't believe that he would be forced to eat this stone, so small, yet with such mysterious and possibly dangerous significance. It was so unexpected that doubts and fears instantly filled his mind. Raymond wasn't sure if the stone was actually edible, or if it was just some kind of illusion, a magical symbol, or a test meant for only the bravest. Thoughts raced through his mind. What if it was a trap? What if it was a test beyond his abilities? Not only did he have to simply swallow this stone, he also had to do it whole, without any bites or breaks, which added to the moment of tension and raised the stakes. Although doubts did not leave him, Raymond quickly made a decision. He could not let fear take over. If this stone was really going to affect his magical power, he had to take the risk and accept this test. After all, most likely, it was this stone that could become the key to a breakthrough, the very source that would help him discover new horizons of his power and strength, and make him a true magician. After brief but intense thought, weighing all the possible risks and consequences, he carefully picked up this strange, unfamiliar stone. It was cold, but it felt alive, as if it were breathing. A quiet, barely noticeable pulsation that pierced his fingers and seemed to charge him with energy. Suddenly, powerful forces began to erupt around him. An incredible, almost unlimited energy that sought to break free, filling every millimeter of his body with living magic, causing his blood to pulse faster and his thoughts to become clearer, deeper, stronger. It was mana, the very essence of magic, which literally burst forth, swirling and pulsing in the air, permeated with an amazing energy that permeated the space around. At first, this force was concentrated in one center, almost invisible to the eye, gradually increasing its power, like a mighty volcano about to awaken. Then energy began to pulse and rage within his body, spreading through every fiber, permeating every inch of his being. He felt powerful forces enveloping him, like a wave sweeping away everything in its path, expanding around him a radiant circle of pure energy that shimmered with all the colors of the spectrum. His body was slowly enveloped by a mysterious living force that, like fire, ignited from within, filling him with new life and immense inner power. It flowed through his veins in a hot stream, pulsing in unison with every heartbeat, penetrating his muscles into the smallest cells, filling every corner of his body with an unknown but extraordinary power. However, over time, this frantic flow of energy began to calm down. The pulsation subsided, and the body, as if awakened to a new life, became accustomed to this unknown force, which now seemed to be an integral part of it. Raymond realized that if he could maintain and develop this state, he would not only strengthen his mana veins, the energy channels through which magical power flows, but also greatly expand them, increasing the potential of his own magic. And it was this that opened up the opportunity for him to stop the destruction of his people, avert the catastrophe looming over the world, and avoid a large-scale war that could destroy all life. His expulsion from college was a real blow to his soul. Not just painful and unexpected, but also deeply humiliating, like a devastating sentence that shattered all his dreams and hopes to pieces. It was like a sudden interruption of all the paths leading forward, as if the world around him had instantly turned pale, and the future that had once seemed bright and promising suddenly turned into a dark abyss in which there was no support left. Every breath of air at that moment seemed like a burden, every thought a painful wound. He felt that this was not just a defeat, but a bitter humiliation that would leave a mark on his soul forever. So he was forced to descend to the lowest rung, to become a third-rate mercenary magician, forced to carry out random, often dirty and dangerous orders just to survive in this harsh world. His life turned into a series of petty battles for each day, for each coin, which was barely enough to cover the most necessary. However, even in this chaos and hopelessness, a spark pulsed deep inside his soul. A spark of unwavering will that did not allow him to finally give up. Despite all his despair and disappointment, he was determined. No matter what, he would do everything in his power to change his own fate. He dreamed of regaining his lost dignity, of reviving himself from the ashes, of becoming stronger, better, and wiser than he had ever been. It was his silent promise to himself, a promise to fight, even if the whole world turned against him. With these unwavering thoughts, he headed for the office of Professor Hubert, a man he trusted implicitly, who had once believed in him when no one else dared. For him, it was like returning to the last island of hope, to someone who could help him find his way back. The professor was already waiting for him. He was sitting at a large, massive wooden table that seemed to hold a lot of secrets and knowledge. The professor's fingers calmly gripped the cup, and his gaze was penetrating and at the same time calm. With a gesture, he invited Raymond to sit opposite, as if saying, "I am here to listen to you. I am on your side." Without wasting any time, the professor poured the boy a mug of hot, aromatic tea, thick, rich, and spicy, radiating warmth and comfort. This simple gesture was like a sign of concern, a small island of calm in the midst of the storm. But from his face and the tense atmosphere in the office, one could tell that something was deeply troubling him. The professor, who was used to being unwavering, looked anxious and worried today. He noticed that Raymond was completely different, silent, thoughtful, as if he carried a heavy, painful secret that weighed heavily on his heart. Hubert suspected that the boy was facing some difficult test, and that he was trying to hide this test even from those closest to him. This hidden pain worried the professor. He saw that it was not just ordinary difficulties, but something that could shake the very foundation of the personality. He suspected that the problems were related to his classmates, perhaps conflicts, bullying, or other cruel games that often go unnoticed by teachers, but that affect the weakest. This thought caused him real concern, because his student's future was at stake. But Raymond only smiled softly through the bitterness of the memories, remembering how once, in a past life, Professor Hubert had been the only person who had never lost faith in him, even in the darkest and most difficult times. This faith was like a light burning in the deepest darkness. He quietly assured his mentor that everything was fine, even though inside, everything was burning with doubts and worries. With sincerity and gratitude in his voice, he thanked him for the support and faith that the mentor had put in him, not only for the magic lessons, but also for the fact that someone believes in you unconditionally, even when you yourself begin to doubt yourself. The professor was surprised and moved by the sincerity, warmth, and strength in the boy's words. He felt that he was not just a student, but a person who was still fighting for his place in the world. A little moved, he replied that taking care of students is not just his duty, but also his calling, a part of his life. He is ready to be supportive, even when the path becomes rocky. However, despite all this understanding and compassion, the professor could not ignore the facts that Raymond had fallen asleep during one of the lessons, and therefore discipline demanded punishment. After all, without severity, you cannot build true strength and order. He had to prepare a detailed, thorough report on one of the most difficult sections of the book, the topic of amplifying magical flows. This topic was difficult for even the most talented high school students, and was a real test of knowledge and understanding of the essence of magic. Despite the complexity of the task, Raymond had to complete it alone, without any help, indulgence, or relief. It was a challenge that would prove his strength and determination. It was at that moment that a message about a new mission suddenly appeared on the screen in front of him, both a challenge and an opportunity. It distracted him, but it also opened the door to new horizons and adventures that lay ahead. The professor, noticing this, asked if the task was too difficult, if he needed help or support. His voice was full of concern and a desire to support, because he understood that now, more than ever, Raymond needed support. He placed the same book on the theory of magical mana enhancement on the table, a real Bible for those who seek to rise to a new level of sorcery. A book that opened the door to secrets beyond the reach of ordinary students. Raymond calmly thanked him, feeling his confidence grow. With firmness in his voice and a burning fire in his heart, he agreed to take on this task, as a symbol of a new beginning and a fight for his future. After the conversation, he went straight to his room, where he immersed himself almost continuously in studying complex material until late in the evening. Every minute was filled with concentration and a desire to learn new things, overcome obstacles, and move forward. Despite the incredible complexity of the subject and the depth of his knowledge, this did not seem to him an insurmountable obstacle. On the contrary, he felt that each new challenge only fueled his thirst for knowledge, fueling an inner fire that would not let him stop. In his past life, he had spent years relentlessly studying the theory of magic, sacrificing rest, entertainment, and even sleep. So devoted was he to his art and his goal of becoming the most powerful wizard he could possibly be. Even after choosing the path of a mercenary, which seemed far from the asceticism of academic magic, he did not stop there. On the contrary, he continued to persistently improve his skills, constantly searching for new sources of experience, new techniques, new knowledge that could help him reach a completely different level. But now, at a new stage in his life, he faced an even more significant and responsible goal, one that eclipsed all his previous ambitions, taking up all his time and energy. It demanded from him complete dedication, endurance, and indomitable strength of spirit, because his future depended on it. He had to tirelessly train and develop the endurance of his mana veins, thin but vital energy channels on which depended not only the further growth of his magical power, but also the very ability to open new horizons of sorcery, conquer new peaks, overcome his own limitations, and become a true magician who could be relied on. These magical vessels were an integral part of a finely tuned system of internal organs, responsible for the continuous movement of mana throughout the body, nourishing every cell with invisible but life-giving energy. Mana was strengthened through special breathing techniques, during which each inhalation enriched the energy, and the exhalation purified it of impurities, contributing to the growth of the strength of the flow. It flowed through the entire body, like an invisible stream of light, gathering in the central heart, the seat of magical power, from where it spread in new waves, spreading through space and time. In a past life, Raymond mastered the art of controlling this energy flow and learned to amplify it, bringing the power of mana to unprecedented heights. He gained such skill through grueling, brutal training, challenging powerful monsters, testing the limits of his strength and endurance. After all, only under critical load did mana reveal its true power, giving itself full force to its owner. He learned to significantly speed up the process of accumulating and releasing mana, achieving results that previously seemed impossible for an ordinary mage. The more powerful and resilient his veins were, the greater the flow of mana passed through them, reaching his heart and filling it with endless energy. The more mana accumulated in the heart, the faster and more effectively it manifested itself in the world, taking the form of magical actions and influencing the surrounding reality. Thus, he became a master not only of powerful attacks, but also of reliable defense, combining both aspects of magic to achieve maximum results in battle. However, one day he made a mistake that put his life in serious danger. He did not notice the hidden danger and did not have time to dodge the crushing blow of the powerful monster. Although his magic was usually weak, this time his body couldn't withstand such a strain. Every cell screamed in pain and tension. The blow was so powerful that he was thrown back with tremendous force, and he crashed into the cold stone wall with a thud, feeling the life drain from him. From the powerful impact, the wall gradually began to be covered with numerous cracks that spread across its surface like a spider's web, creating the impression that it was about to crumble into many small pieces under the pressure of the force that hit it. At the very moment when everything seemed hopeless and every hope had faded, he clearly realized that his life was hanging by the thinnest, almost invisible thread, barely holding him above the abyss. This fragile border between existence and eternal darkness was so thin that the slightest breath or inattention could be fatal. It seemed to him that every next second in this chaos could become decisive, decide his fate, whether it would be salvation or a fall into a bottomless abyss from which there is no return. His body was sinking mercilessly into the boundless cold darkness, as if he were falling into a deep, bottomless abyss that swallowed everything around him. Light, sound, hope, and even the faintest glimmers of life. This darkness didn't just surround him. It seemed alive, breathing, all-consuming, sucking him into its cold and merciless embrace. It seemed as if he were flying through endless space, where every second stretched into eternity, and nothing could save him. At that moment, he desperately tried to understand whether the heavens themselves had heard his pleas, or whether everything that had happened was just a coincidence, a strange and rare stroke of luck that had happened to him at the most critical moment. Whether it was fate or chance, the fact that he was still alive was incredible and mysterious. However, surprisingly even to himself, he survived. As if fate itself, realizing his importance and the incompleteness of his path, gave him another chance. The opportunity to fight on, regain strength, and continue the fight for his life and future. This rebirth was like a new breath, a new beginning among the ruins. Coming to his senses, he slowly opened his eyes and looked around. Before him unfolded a dark, cold cave, filled with mysterious mysticism and ancient charm. The space seemed alive. Here there was a quiet echo of the past, filled with strange, almost incomprehensible sounds. Echoes that reached back through the centuries, as if the cave itself remembered all the secrets of this world. It was a place that seemed forgotten even by time. Ancient and mysterious, preserving a history long erased by centuries, covered in secrets and legends. Even the oldest villagers preferred not to mention it, passing down its stories as horror stories or wise parables that teach us to fear the unknown and respect the power of the ancient. It was here, in the shadow of these centuries, that he came across two ancient grimoires, books that had remained hidden from human eyes for years. They had been preserved from time, oblivion, and neglect, like treasures waiting for their chosen one to reveal their secrets. As soon as his fingers touched the yellowed, faded pages of these volumes, a blinding, blinding light instantly exploded around him. It filled the entire cave with pure, pulsating magical energy that lived and breathed like a living organism. It was like the awakening of forgotten powers, ready to come to his aid. These were legendary grimoires called Through the Veins and The Sorcerer's Body, books that contained ancient knowledge, shrouded in myth, and protected by the most powerful magical spells. Intended only for the most worthy, powerful, and devoted sorcerers. Both volumes contained priceless secrets, knowledge, and techniques that could open up incredible possibilities for the sorcerer if he could unravel their mysteries and learn to harness the powers hidden between the lines. The path to true power and limitless magical potential depended on them. The first volume detailed methods for developing the sorcerer's physical body, revealing ways to expand and strengthen the mana veins, thin but vital vessels that run through all parts of the body and transport magical energy. This opened the way to new heights of magical power and incredible endurance. The second volume revealed the mysteries of the gradual transformation of muscle tissue into magical tissue, the true art of transforming the body into a strong and flexible instrument of sorcery. Thanks to this, the body could withstand the strongest loads, possess incredible strength and speed, becoming invincible. The stronger the body became, the more reliable and powerful the mana veins became. They turned into strong magical channels that provided an uninterrupted, stable flow of energy, filling every cell and enhancing the sorcerer's magical potential to incredible levels. In adulthood, this process occurred slowly, gradually. But in the adolescent organism, everything was much more intense, deeper, and faster. Here, broad horizons for magical development opened up, and each new training and practice gave results that exceeded the wildest expectations. That was why in this life, he was determined to put all his efforts into overcoming the natural limitations of his mana veins, not allowing weakness to become a sentence. His will was unwavering, and his desire to become stronger was absolute. After long, exhausting, and almost continuous training, the long-awaited night came, an evening that enveloped everything around with silence and tranquility, giving a feeling of inner harmony and peace. It seemed that at this time, the world fell silent to give an opportunity to recover and gather strength for new achievements. His body was exhausted, every muscle aching with fatigue more than he could bear, but he continued. He trained all day long without a break, putting all his strength, all his spirit and will into every movement, relying only on endurance and an unwavering desire for the goal. Despite his incredible fatigue, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. This was his journey, and he wasn't going to back down. Understanding the importance of balance, he made a firm decision to end the day on a high note, giving himself a well-deserved rest and time to fully recover. For each new day should be a step forward on the path to mastery and power. Suddenly, a new message caught his attention, a task that required him to run 5 kilometers using ancient magic. An unexpected but important test for his tired body, calling for new efforts and victories. He wanted to give up, to abandon everything and just stop, to feel the relief that comes with the cessation of the struggle. But new messages relentlessly poured into his magical device, as if pressing it, leaving no chance for respite, recovery, or even a brief pause for reflection. Having come to terms with the inevitability of the situation, he clearly realized that to retreat means to doom oneself to defeat, and never see a chance to change one's own fate. So one cannot retreat under any circumstances. One will have to go through this exhausting and difficult ordeal to the very end, even if one's strength is at its limit. If fate itself unexpectedly gave him another chance, another opportunity to prove to himself and the whole world what he was capable of, then he felt an irresistible obligation to use this chance to the fullest, leaving no room for defeat or regret for lost opportunities. And he rushed forward as if consumed by obsession, without pausing for a moment, until his strength began to fail him, and his body gradually trembled with exhaustion, like a taut string about to snap. By the end of the workout, he could barely stand on his feet. Every muscle was searingly burning from the overexertion. His breathing became heavy and ragged, and his mind was on fire from overexertion. The forces were rapidly leaving his body, which seemed to be becoming stone and cold. But the path was almost complete. Only the last step remained. The last drop of effort to achieve the long-awaited goal. He found himself at the very finish line, where there was a barely noticeable line that had to be crossed to achieve the desired result that had previously seemed unattainable. And now, a little later, he finally completed his mission, feeling not just physical fatigue, but also a deep, sincere satisfaction that filled his heart. Satisfaction from the success he had achieved through his own work and determination. His body refused to obey. He was so exhausted that he could barely move. But inside him burned a fire of pride and self-respect that did not let him give up, even in the most difficult moments. His soul was filled with pride and inner strength. He overcame all difficulties, forced himself to move forward, and proved to himself and everyone around him that he was capable of much more than anyone could have thought or expected. At that time, all this was being watched by his classmate Anton, who firmly believed that Raymond was simply wasting his strength, but it was a senseless waste of time and energy. The next day, Raymond arrived at the professor's office without the slightest delay, holding in his hands a carefully prepared, detailed report filled with his own conclusions, analysis, and findings. After reading the report, Professor Hubert could not believe his eyes. The conclusions reached by Raymond were worthy of true academic magicians. They were striking in their depth, accuracy, and novelty. It seemed almost unbelievable to him that a student had personally worked out such a complex, comprehensive theory and opened up new ways to understand magic. However, Raymond, confidently raising his chin, firmly declared that he had done everything on his own and, if necessary, was even ready to swear an oath on the mana, demonstrating his loyalty, honesty, and determination. At that moment, he seemed incredibly determined, full of strength and confidence in his own abilities, ready to overcome any obstacles and adversities. Not every student would dare to speak so openly and confidently with the professor, demonstrating their own maturity, courage, and unwavering will. And although the professor remained somewhat skeptical, he could not help but admit that Raymond's work was worthy of the highest praise and opened up prospects for further study and development. Raymond realized an important truth. The deeper and more thorough his understanding of the theory, the more powerful and effective his magic became, which filled him with strength and confidence in his own abilities. That is why he decided to turn to Professor Hubert with a personal request, hoping for support, understanding, and the opportunity to take the next important step on his path as a sorcerer, which will lead him to true greatness. Professor Hubert did not expect such decisive and assertive behavior from Raymond at all. It surprised him because most students behaved much more restrained and were afraid to show such confidence in their own words and actions. Without hesitation or doubt, Raymond boldly requested access to the cathedral library, a highly protected place, closed to most ordinary students, where the most valuable and powerful sources of knowledge were kept. The professor, being an experienced mentor, believed that the student library should contain a sufficient amount of materials that fully correspond to Raymond's level of knowledge, and therefore, at first, he did not particularly approve of this initiative. However, Raymond honestly admitted without any concealment that he had already studied all the books in the student library, from the first to the last page. looking through each volume and absorbing all the information he could find there. This openness and sincerity unexpectedly made a strong impression on Professor Hubert, who was even a little confused because he was faced with such rare honesty and a genuine thirst for knowledge. After all, most students never even touched the books gathering dust on the shelves, and most of them had no idea what was inside these ancient volumes. Although Raymond was telling the truth, the cathedral library remained too valuable and sacred a repository of knowledge to simply open access to anyone who wanted it, even to such diligent and talented students. So the professor decided to personally check whether Raymond really deserved the privilege of entering this secret treasury. He was faced with difficult tests that were to determine the boy's true dignity. Raymond gladly accepted this challenge and approached it with enthusiasm and confidence, not afraid of any difficulties and ready to prove his own strength, intelligence, and dignity. The professor loaded him with a series of complex theoretical tasks that could stump even the smartest and most experienced student, testing his depth of knowledge and level of preparation. However, Raymond did not lose sight of the main idea. The deeper he understood the essence of magic, the more powerful his own power and art as a sorcerer became. He was determined. No matter what the cost, he was determined to rise to the next level and overcome all obstacles. Even in the most difficult, most unbearable moments of testing, he had not the slightest right to stop or retreat. His desire to move forward had to be unwavering, despite all the difficulties, pain, and fatigue. In addition, by completing various tasks and missions, he received valuable mana stones, an indispensable resource for strengthening magic. So for him, it was a double win, both practical experience and material reinforcement of strength. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a familiar voice that unexpectedly sounded nearby, abruptly interrupting his deep thoughts. It was Anton, a classmate with whom Raymond had repeatedly engaged in heated arguments, and who never hid his skepticism and distrust of the boy's abilities. Raymond looked at him warily, not understanding for what purpose Anton had suddenly appeared so close. It seemed to him that Anton had come with the intention of revenge, but he only shrugged skeptically and waved him away contemptuously. "Who would waste time taking revenge on such a pathetic magician as you?" Anton said with a hint of contempt, as if this simple fact had long since decided everything. "It will be enough to simply humiliate him to the very bottom, break his spirit, and destroy all hopes to finally deprive Raymond of the opportunity to develop and dream." He warned that their next meeting would take place during a practical, magical combat lesson, a kind of statement that challenged and, at the same time, placed the burden of responsibility on each of the participants. After these words, he turned sharply, without wasting time explaining, and left with his friends, leaving behind a light cold wind of doubt and uncertainty. Raymond silently followed them with his gaze, clenching his fists tightly, feeling the tension and anxiety build in his chest like stones pressing against his heart. Suddenly, he remembered that very magical combat lesson that was soon to take place, and at that moment, the tension became almost palpable, as if an invisible chain reaction of emotions and memories had torn his chest apart. Back then, in that lesson, students had the right to choose opponents who roughly matched their level of strength and skill, creating a balance between challenge and chance of victory. It was in this lesson, in a past life, that he experienced the worst humiliation, which was deeply etched in his memory, leaving an unhealed wound in his soul and a bitter residue in his heart. This cruel moment practically destroyed his academic hopes and put an end to his further studies, forcing him to reflect on the meaning and purpose of his existence. But now everything was different. He realized that he had to be prepared both physically and morally, because this battle would not just be a test of strength, but a clash of will and spirit. Since then, he has tirelessly dedicated every day to hard training, putting all his strength, thoughts, and hopes into preparing for the big event. He plunged into the depths of the theory of magic, studying the smallest details with extreme attention, for his mind sought to unravel the most complex secrets and gain a solid foundation for future actions and victories. Every day, he brought the professor new completed tasks, confirming not only his knowledge, but also his unwavering dedication to the cause and desire to grow. Finally, the decisive evening arrived, the last one before the fight, when the atmosphere around was filled with tension that became almost palpable for everyone present. Raymond has collected a sufficient number of mana stones, valuable crystals that can strengthen the body and spirit, help withstand incredible loads, and prepare for the test. However, the power of these stones aroused both admiration and fear in him. It was a real element, capable of both granting unprecedented power and absorbing all living things in a whirlpool of its destructive energy. He felt doubts and uncertainty, whether his body and spirit would withstand such an incredible, almost elemental force that was growing from within. pulsating in every cell of his body. Fear slowly crept into his eyes, filling them with anxiety and a shadow of doubt capable of suppressing even the boldest thoughts and aspirations. However, in a moment he gathered all his will into one fist, took a deep breath, filling his lungs with fresh air, and was able to calm his agitated mind so that he could stand firmly on his feet again and look ahead. This was his only chance, perhaps the last of his life, and he knew he could not afford any mistakes, any doubts or hesitations. If he had already gone through this long and difficult path, then now he had to give all his strength, will, and determination to achieve the goal he had chosen for himself. Holding the mana stones tightly in his hands, he focused and slowly absorbed them, feeling the powerful energy flow into every cell of his body, filling him with a strength he had never felt before. At that very moment, the energy accumulating inside him began to rage violently, like an explosion of a real element, breaking through all barriers and restraints. His body seemed to ignite with an internal fire that spread warmth and strength through every cell, granting him superhuman vitality and invincible power. But it was incredibly difficult to contain this mad flow of mana. It seemed to want to burst out, destroying all obstacles, and Raymond struggled intensely with the uncontrollable urge to maintain control over himself and his own power. He was clearly aware that he had to immediately direct this turbulent, irrepressible energy into the right direction. Otherwise, its uncontrolled explosion could destroy everything around him, causing harm not only to his enemies, but also to himself. Gathering all his willpower and tension, he tried to give the magical flow a clear, stable form, controlling every movement, every inhale and exhale, in order to direct this element to where it would bring the greatest benefit and not cause chaos. Stretching his hand forward with maximum concentration, he began to form a magical ball that slowly but surely gained strength and light, like a small burning sun ready to explode with a powerful energy wave. It was extremely painful. He gritted his teeth, barely feeling his own pain, which pierced every muscle and nerve in his body, straining and fighting to keep fear and confusion from taking over his mind. It was urgent to draw a new magic circle, a complex pattern of power that would become the foundation for safe and precise control over this violent and elemental energy of mana. Even the slightest careless movement or the subtlest mistake could be fatal, stopping the heart, destroying all the years of work, turning hopes into emptiness and hopelessness. The flow of mana was too powerful and uncontrollable, like a raging storm that sought to break all restraints and explode with such force that it was capable of destroying everything in its path. But he finally made a decision. It was impossible to retreat now, because the way back was forever closed, and his will became unshakable. Gathering the last remnants of will and strength of spirit, Raymond began to carefully but persistently form a magical ball that radiated an amazing, almost sacred energy. Although the pain pierced every cell of his body, squeezing and destroying him from the inside, he did not allow himself to give up, did not succumb to weakness, and did not surrender under the pressure of strength. His magical power grew to incredible proportions, so much so that a bright pillar of light could be seen from the window of the room, cutting through the darkness and stretching to the very sky. And suddenly, like a flash of realization, he realized he had achieved something truly incredible, something he had never imagined before. He was able to completely assimilate and absorb all this energy that pulsed within him, and now it had become an integral part of himself, a new strength and power. This meant that he had conquered the second magic circle, gaining a new level of power over magic, and the ability to wield it with unparalleled control. But the next moment, overwhelmed and exhausted by the incredible load, he fell to the cold floor, losing consciousness, because his body and mind simply could not hold this burden any longer. And now, the long-awaited and decisive day has come. The moment when all the years of training, trials, and dedication must manifest themselves in a real result. From the very morning, Raymond appeared in the professor's office, holding in his hands carefully prepared and completed tasks, on which he had worked for more than one day, putting a part of his soul into every word. But before the battle began, the professor suddenly decided to ask Raymond one last, most difficult question, one that would ultimately determine the student's true level of understanding and skill. This test was important not only to assess his knowledge, but also to find out how deeply Raymond understood the essence of magic, its inner nature, and stages of development. The question concerned the 4 basic stages of using magical power: understanding, imagining, constructing, and manifesting. The professor wanted the student to explain clearly and in detail which of these stages was most important for achieving true success in witchcraft and developing mastery. This challenge froze in Raymond's mind, forcing him to pause and concentrate for a moment. He felt that now every word, every thought mattered. The answer had to be not just correct, but deep and comprehensive, one that would open up new horizons of understanding. The professor himself admitted that he regretted his choice to ask this particular question. He had recently witnessed another student fail to give a comprehensive answer, and this had made the mentor doubt the advisability of such a test. He even considered changing the question or apologizing to Raymond, fearing that he would fail. But Raymond, feeling an unshakable confidence within himself, resolutely stopped the professor. He was ready and knew exactly what he wanted to say. His eyes burned with the desire to prove that he deserved trust and support, that he was able to uncover the depths of magic and understand its essence. And he began to speak. His words were not a simple set of facts or memorized terms. They were a real speech, filled with wisdom that only comes after years of study and practice. Each sentence reflected his inner understanding of magic as a living force that flows through the world and people, changing their reality. He explained that magic is energy that manifests itself in the world through mana, an invisible but tangible force that permeates everything around. And to learn to use it, you need to go through 4 main stages, each of which is an important link in the chain of magical development. The first stage is understanding. It consists in a deep study of the laws of nature, the basic principles and patterns that govern the world and magical processes. Without this foundation, it is impossible to build a strong house of magic. It is like the base on which all further knowledge rests. The second stage is visualization. Here, the magician gains strength by forming in his mind a clear image of what he wants to create or change. This is the process when theoretical knowledge comes to life, takes shape, becomes alive in the imagination, and directs further actions. Visualization gives the magician the opportunity to see the final result before he begins to create. The third stage is construction. This is the direct formulation and construction of a magical spell, formula, or ritual that will bring the intended effect to life. Here, the magician transforms his thoughts into concrete actions, creating a tool that can be used in the real world. And finally, the fourth stage is manifestation. This is the culmination of the entire process, when magic materializes and begins to work in the physical world. The application of the formed formula causes real changes that affect the surrounding world, changing it according to the will of the magician. Raymond emphasized that each of these stages is an integral part of the entire cycle. The absence or weakness of any link will lead to defeat or weak action of magic. But the most important, in his opinion, is the stage of understanding, because without a solid foundation, there will never be true power. The professor listened attentively, as if absorbing every word. He felt that he was not just a student, but a magician, capable of deep and unconventional thinking. His eyes shone with respect, and even a little surprise, because he had not expected to see such an answer. When Raymond finished, there was silence. Then the professor, gathering his thoughts, asked what had inspired the boy to come to such an understanding, which had become the impetus for deep reflection and discovery. Raymond thought for a moment, gathered himself, and calmly explained that he was inspired by personal experiences, the harsh lessons of the past, and faith in his own strength. He realized that magic was not just a tool for combat or power, but a complex, living process that required not only knowledge, but also inner wisdom and harmony. For him, magic became a metaphor for life, where understanding is the path to light, imagination is creativity and dreaming, construction is discipline and work, and manifestation is the realization of a dream in the real world. And only by following this path to the end can one achieve true power and control. The professor sighed deeply, feeling a sense of respect for his student blossom within him. He saw in Raymond not just a student, but a true magician who had every chance to change not only his own life, but also the fate of his people. It was a pivotal moment, the moment when mentor and students realized that great challenges lay ahead, but also great opportunities, and that Raymond was ready to embark on this journey with a pure heart and an unwavering will. This conversation became an impetus for Raymond to new achievements. He felt that he had crossed another milestone, discovered truths for himself that strengthened his spirit and gave him strength. And now, full of new determination, he was ready to accept the challenges of the future, not afraid of difficulties and obstacles, because he knew that true magic begins with a deep understanding of himself and the world around him. Understanding, building, and manifesting are those stages of the magical path that can only be achieved through tireless hard work, long study, and relentless practice, honing every movement and every touch of magical power. Whereas, at the stage of imagination, no external effort can replace the inner freedom of imagination that is the foundation of true magic. It is going beyond the boundaries of logic and the rigid framework of reason, achieving true freedom of imagination through courage and deep inner courage. This is what constitutes the essence of magic, is the source of its boundless power and continuous creation of new worlds. For him, this feeling of freedom and creativity burned in his heart like an unquenchable fire, igniting the strongest aspirations and filling every movement of his body with powerful energy that encouraged him to move forward no matter what. Imagine an ordinary arrow flying at a target. But in the world of magic, it can instantly transform into a blazing fiery arrow of the second circle, which changes not only its form, but also the very essence of its existence, becoming a symbol of transformation and power. And if you change the idea of this arrow, the image can transform further, acquiring a new form, new power, and a completely new purpose, which opens up limitless possibilities for the sorcerer. Without the ability to go beyond mere mental realization, to let go of the constraints of logic and rationality, no true creation will be born. After all, magic is, first and foremost, freedom of imagination, the belief that the impossible can become possible. If you delve deeper into these reflections, you can understand that magic makes it possible to create unique things, something that the world has never seen, something that did not exist either in imagination or in reality, and something that can change the very foundations of existence. The professor, listening to this detailed and profound answer, was genuinely impressed because it combined wisdom, simplicity, and truth, which are rarely found even among experienced magicians. He had not expected the young student to be able to explain a complex topic so clearly, comprehensively, and confidently, especially considering that he had recently seen a completely different level of understanding during a conversation with another student. This answer was like a shadow that suddenly appeared against the background of the bright sun. Unexpected and at the same time undeniable, it shed light on the essence of magic, which begins with a deep understanding of the laws of nature and ends with conscious and balanced control over them. Ultimately, according to Raymond, true magic lies not in the blind application of force, but in harmony with it, in a full understanding of its essence and the laws that underlie it. For the professor, Raymond was a real discovery. He saw that this young man was able to penetrate the most subtle and profound aspects of witchcraft, which was rare among students, even at the highest level. After a long and meaningful conversation, the teacher made a decision to give Raymond access to the cathedral library, because he realized that the student needed much more space for development than the usual student collection offered. After all, the department's library is a true treasury of knowledge, inaccessible to most, where the rarest and most valuable volumes were kept, opening up boundless horizons of magical knowledge to the reader. Having received permission, Raymond wasted no time in heading to this vast library, his heart pounding with impatience and trepidation at the new discoveries that awaited him among the thousands of books. He carefully examined each shelf, looking for books that could expand his knowledge as much as possible, primarily in those areas that particularly interested him and in which he strove for excellence. As expected, the library was extremely large. Even the first floor was occupied by a spacious, bright hall with high shelves, where a special atmosphere of strength and wisdom reigned, inspiring respect and awe. It was obvious that this library was significantly different from the student library. There was an atmosphere of true knowledge here, imbued with the spirit of grandeur and ancient secrets waiting to be discovered. He quickly found volumes on magical ballistics and a crash course in magical botany, topics that particularly interested Raymond and in which he saw enormous potential for his development. This knowledge was invaluable to him as it opened up new horizons and allowed him to significantly increase his capabilities in magic, becoming a solid foundation for future achievements. Even more fascinating to Raymond was that these books did not contradict the established basic laws of magic, but on the contrary, they revealed and supplemented them more deeply, shedding light on subtle nuances that remained unnoticed by less experienced wizards. Suddenly, the silence in the library was broken by the soft, barely audible clatter of heels, echoing among the endless rows of ancient shelves, adding a certain mystical mystery to the room. The voice that came from behind was quiet and calm, but at the same time stern and confident. "You are holding in your hands an extremely interesting and rare book, one that is very rare in this library." Raymond looked up in surprise and couldn't believe his eyes. It seemed as if living mana was coming out of the book. pulsating and shimmering with different shades of light, filling the air with a special energy. With his body trembling with surprise, he carefully turned around, his eyes searching for someone who might speak. But behind him, it was empty, and the room remained deserted and striking in its silence. But suddenly he felt an imperceptible but very clear presence nearby, as if someone, or something, invisible but attentive, was watching his every movement and breath. A figure of incredible beauty suddenly appeared before his eyes. A graceful woman whose posture radiated confidence, and whose graceful movements spoke of years of impeccable control over strength and herself. It was she, Daria Snow White herself, the legendary sorceress whose name was known and respected throughout the country. Raymond instantly rose from his seat, his face lit up with a warm smile, and he greeted sincerely, feeling his heart fill with pride and joy at meeting this great personality. Over the years, he had sincerely admired Daria because she had reached the 8th circle of magic, a peak that only a few on the entire planet had been able to conquer. And this fact aroused his sincere admiration and respect. Despite the fact that Daria was already 80 years old, her unusually large supply of mana allowed her to maintain the striking appearance of a young and graceful lady, and her Tower of Fire was considered the best among all the Red Towers of France. However, Raymond could not understand what exactly had brought her here, and a slight uneasiness grew in his heart that he found it difficult to hide. Sensing his anxiety, Daria smiled softly, her eyes sparkling with warmth, and she reassured him that today she was just a simple interlocutor here, lucky to be in this temple of knowledge. With a slight playfulness, she handed him a candy on a stick, as if a small symbol of friendship and mutual understanding between mentor and student. She wondered how a young man of Raymond's stature was able to gain permission to visit this closed library, as it was a privilege only for the best and most trusted. Without hesitating for a second, Raymond explained that this was made possible by the personal order of Professor Hubert, who saw potential in him. What she heard surprised Daria quite a bit, because it was difficult for her to imagine a strict and demanding professor who would allow such a young student access to the sacred repository of knowledge. But Raymond neither denied nor argued. His words were the undeniable and sincere truth, and he saw no reason to prove anything. Now that the circumstances had cleared up, Daria looked at him carefully, noticing that he was deeply immersed in the study of something extremely valuable and rare, which elevated him above ordinary students. Her sharp, almost piercing gaze of an experienced magician instantly caught the finest detail. His mana was incredibly pure and transparent, like crystal ice, and spread evenly, without any disruptions, throughout all the cells of his body, testifying to enormous strength and inner harmony. For most magicians, the perfect balance of energy that Raymond possessed seemed like an almost unattainable dream, a true treasure that fate bestows only on those few who are willing to devote themselves to boundless work and inner harmony. He felt the tension pressing down on his shoulders like a stone as he tried to understand whether this great and famous woman had really noticed his most secret, hidden feature. But instead of a harsh assessment, Daria gently, with a light, almost maternal warmth, patted him on the shoulder, as if whispering softly, "Don't be afraid. Everything is fine. You're on the right track." Her voice was soft, but there was an unwavering confidence in it as she emphasized that she had not come here to teach him how to live, or impose her will on him. Raymond nodded silently, filled with gratitude, and quietly spoke words of thanks for her understanding and respect for him as an individual. Suddenly, Daria sharply struck the floor with her stick, and a dull, deep sound echoed through the air. A wave of pure, dazzling mana flashed around her, instantly filling the entire space. Raymond froze, moved and amazed by the colossal power that emanated from her, as if from living fire that pulsed with life and wisdom. She confidently looked him straight in the eye, and her words conveyed a brief but powerful message. Never give up. Even when the world seems hostile, move forward and constantly improve your abilities. A new fire of determination flared up in Raymond's eyes. He really needed that kind of support to keep his faith and keep moving forward. Afterwards, he slowly left the library, carefully holding the heavy wooden door and still thinking back to this unexpected, fairy tale-like meeting. For him, it was like a moment from a dream, to receive words of wisdom from such a great and extraordinary individual. But his thoughts were suddenly interrupted when 3 familiar boys appeared before him. Those who had long mocked him, not understanding why he had been granted the right to visit the professor's closed library. They brazenly and shamelessly declared that Raymond would achieve nothing. that all his efforts would vanish like dust in the wind, and he would remain a weakling. However, despite the ridicule, even these envious people could not deny one thing. He did not stop training, put his soul into it, and firmly went towards his goal. But none of them could guarantee that this stubbornness would ever bring him true success and recognition. The long-awaited moment of practical lessons in magical combat finally arrived. The air in the auditorium was filled with tension, excitement, and anxiety. The rules were simple and clear. The first person summoned enters the arena and chooses an opponent from among everyone in the hall. The instructors always tried to select opponents of approximately the same level so that the fight was fair and both sides could show their skills. In his past life, Raymond was often the first to be summoned, not because of his skill, but because he was considered the weakest in the entire academy. This time he heard whispers beginning to spread among the students. Everyone expected him to be called out first again, as his mana supply was considered the smallest among those present. Some of the boys even brazenly pushed him, hoping that when he was called out, he would choose them as opponents. It was their chance to get an easy win and a good grade. The judge raised his hand, calling for silence, and loudly announced that it was time to choose the student who would enter the battlefield first. A tense silence fell in the hall. Some students, covering their mouths, giggled, confident in the quick end of the battle. But suddenly, the judge called a completely different name, Anton Frederick, which caused shock and surprise among everyone present. No one could understand why Anton was chosen, because he was usually left for later fights so that he could prepare better. Anton, without hurrying, got down from his seat, slowly walked past the judges, and coolly thanked them for the honor of being first, as if it was his choice. For the professor who sat among the judges, this was not just a formality. The support of the Frederick family brought significant resources to the department. So this choice also had a political connotation. Only Raymond, sitting on the sidelines, did not show the slightest surprise. He was almost sure that this was exactly what would happen, because he knew very well that the stakes were gaining momentum, and the time for surprises was over. Anton stepped into the center of the fighting area and menacingly slammed his heels on the floor, trying to show not only his strength, but also his control over the situation. His every movement radiated audacity and confidence in his own superiority. Smiling defiantly, he looked directly at Raymond and loudly challenged him to a fight. His tone was mocking, full of challenge and a desire to break his opponent before the fight even began. Raymond was ready for this moment. There was not a shadow of doubt or fear on his face, only calm and a quiet but unwavering determination. Meanwhile, Daria Snow White entered the professor's office quietly, almost silently. Her appearance was so natural that no one would have been surprised if she were part of the very air in this room. The professor, raising his head from his papers, wrinkled his forehead slightly, remarking that next time it would be nice if she announced her visit in advance, because he had many important things to do. But Daria only smiled lightly, almost playfully, as if to say, "It's just a trifle, Professor. Sometimes you can forget the time." For her, a visit to a student, even one as unusual as Raymond, was not something extraordinary that required formal warnings. She immediately got to the point and asked why the professor had allowed a boy named Russell to use the professor's closed library. After all, such permissions were rarely granted without good reasons. The professor tensed up slightly at that moment. A thought flashed through his mind. Maybe this guy has already caused some trouble. His experience suggested that it was rare for young magicians to gain access to secret knowledge so easily. However, Daria, instead of adding to the anxiety, only smiled reassuringly and said that it was quite the opposite. It had been a long time since she had met someone so valuable, rare, and at the same time, promising. The professor nodded, confirming her words, for he could see clearly that the condition of Raymond's magical veins was exceptional. A congenital weakness that is very rare, and is usually considered a sentence for a magician. But Daria unexpectedly denied this assumption, which truly impressed the professor. He did not even expect that this guy could overcome a limit that most considered insurmountable, even with the support of mentors and magical artifacts. She firmly stated that this young man was able to independently advance to the second circle of mana, the level that distinguishes true masters from novices. The professor was momentarily confused. He didn't immediately understand what it was leading to and why it was important for their future work with Raymond. Meanwhile, the final preparations for the practical duel were underway on the battlefield. The students took their places, the spectators fell silent, and the arena shone with magical seals, creating an invisible but strong defense. Suddenly, a translucent system message window flashed before Raymond's eyes. A short but exciting challenge. If he won, he would receive a special reward. A barely noticeable smile touched his lips. This opportunity could change a lot, because the rare artifact that the winner received was usually only available to rich and influential magicians. He understood that this chance was a true gift of fate, opening the way to obtaining priceless magic crystals that could empower any magician. But Anton, standing opposite, spoke in a sharp and defiant tone, full of contempt, trying to throw his opponent off balance. With a sneer that conveyed a sense of superiority, he demanded that Raymond beg him for mercy before the fight even began, wanting not only to humiliate, but also to psychologically break the boy. However, Raymond remained calm and focused, not even trying to respond to the provocations. He did not understand what Anton wanted from him, and did not see the point in wasting words on an empty quarrel. Deep down, he already knew he would win. This certainty was reinforced by the mana that began to thicken around him in a dense, almost smoky layer, preparing him for a formidable fight. Anton, noticing this change, was momentarily confused. He couldn't believe his own eyes. Where did this young man, whom everyone considered a weakling, have such density and stability of mana? But the referee had already loudly shouted, "On position!" The fight had officially begun. Anton instantly focused the fiery mana in his right hand, forming a pulsating ball of flame that flickered and was ready to burst free. His mind could not comprehend how a boy with such weak magical potential could withstand such power. Without wasting time, Anton, with a sharp movement, released a powerful, fiery charge forward, which tore the air, leaving a trail of burning sores behind. Raymond froze for a moment at the unexpected power of this attack. Its power was much greater than he had expected. However, within a second, he quickly came to his senses, gathered all his strength, and instantly reacted to the threat, ready to confront the danger with maximum concentration. He managed to instantly create a dense and reliable magical shield that effectively absorbed and dispersed the powerful wave of burning flames, giving it no chance to cause even the slightest harm. An icy yet burning determination lit up his eyes. He was unwavering and determined not to back down, even if it meant spending the last drop of his life force. One of the instructors, an experienced mage with many years of combat experience, simply couldn't believe his eyes. Raymond had not only created the shield, but had skillfully tilted it at the perfect angle, allowing it to not only reflect, but also to dissipate the heat wave as much as possible, softening the force of the blow. This was done at the level of a true veteran combat mage. The professor, who secretly supported Anton and considered him his undisputed favorite, was deeply shocked. Even in his wildest assumptions, he could not have imagined that Raymond harbored such dangerous and rare abilities. Anton felt his strength slowly but inexorably fading, and he couldn't understand why Raymond was still holding on, as if drawing energy from an invisible source. His fire magic, which had been seething with indescribable power just a minute ago, gradually faded away, losing intensity and strength. It was at this moment that Raymond waited patiently, like a hunter waiting for his prey to weaken and become vulnerable. Concentrating to the limit of his abilities, he began to form the fiery arrow of the second circle of mana, investing maximum strength, precision, and skill into it. With incredible speed, the arrow shot out of his hand, sliced through the air like a flaming spear, and instantly took a trajectory that led straight at Anton. He did not expect such a swift counterattack and froze for a moment, struck by the unexpected speed of the attack. However, his instincts did not fail him. At the last moment, he managed to create a protective barrier in front of him, which sparkled brightly in the air like hot glass. A fiery arrow hissed into the shield, and the flames began to gradually corrode it from the inside, like raging acid. Anton could barely contain the surge of burning energy, his hands trembling from tension and effort. Looking up at Raymond, his eyes widened in shock. He simply couldn't believe what he was seeing. The boy continuously created one arrow after another, without a single pause, like a ruthless fighting machine. The arrows flew at breakneck speed, as if they were fired from the most powerful crossbow, and each carried an incredibly concentrated destructive force. The flow of attacks seemed endless, as if Raymond had a bottomless supply of mana that was constantly replenished. Everyone present, even experienced teachers, were stunned by such a spectacle, realizing that they were witnessing something truly unique and rare. The pace of his attacks was so frantic that it seemed he could create two arrows at the same time without losing accuracy. Anton, despite his shock and growing fatigue, tried to maintain a superior appearance, pretending that the situation was under his control. However, realizing that a prolonged defense was only exhausting him, he decided to put an end to it. Summoning the protective armor of the second circle of mana, he covered his body with a bright halo of flame, seeking to repel further attacks. But Raymond only smiled faintly. It was precisely this move from his opponent that he had been counting on. Anton believed that it was enough to simply hold out until the opponent ran out of mana, and then victory would fall into his hands. However, the reality turned out to be different. A powerful air vortex began to form around Raymond, rapidly growing in strength and radiance. In a matter of seconds, this whirlwind turned into a deadly projectile, which rushed towards Anton with lightning speed. He was stunned and didn't even have time to react normally because he didn't expect such a sudden change in the elements. It turned out to be a special type of wind arrow that instantly analyzed the structure of his fiery armor and tore through it like thin paper. The spectators in the stands erupted in enthusiastic cheers, debating whether this was really the same Raymond Russell they knew. Meanwhile, the referee, sensing that the climax of the fight was near, confidently walked to the center of the field, preparing to announce the decisive stage. Anton was on his knees, breathing heavily and trembling from the unbearable pain that pierced every muscle and nerve in his body, like hundreds of sharp needles digging deep into his skin. He couldn't believe his own eyes and heart. The same weak and inconspicuous magician Raymond, who had been underestimated and despised for so many years, had just dealt him a crushing, merciless defeat. But Anton had not even had time to recover from this shock when Raymond, full of indescribable, burning determination, raised his hand up, preparing to deliver the final, decisive blow that would put an end to this duel. His palm flared with bright electric sparks that crackled and flickered in the air. He was gathering all the accumulated magic, preparing to unleash a powerful lightning strike that would destroy his opponent instantly. And, concentrating all his strength in one impulse, Raymond threw a bolt of lightning straight into Anton's stomach, and he, as if from a powerful explosion, flew back several meters and fell to the ground with a dull, painful thud. The pain that tore at him from within was sharp and throbbing, paralyzing even the slightest movement, forcing Anton to remain motionless, like a broken doll, and even less to get up. But even with his last strength, he had no intention of giving up. Barely suppressing a groan, he gathered the remnants of his mana and tried to summon at least a weak spell that could at least slightly save him from final collapse. But Raymond turned out to be much faster. Like a relentless element, he continued his merciless attack, leaving no chance for retreat. Every punch he took was filled with memories of the years of humiliation, mockery, and pain he had endured from those who now sat in the audience, pushing him to the limit, but not breaking him. The referee, seeing that the situation was getting out of control, loudly shouted the order to immediately stop the fight, as further continuation could have serious consequences. But Professor Hubert, closely following every movement in the arena, decisively intervened and urged the judge not to rush, asking him to look at the events more closely. This duel had to continue. The judge, though doubtful, turned his gaze to Raymond and was deeply shocked by what he saw. The boy's entire body was covered in a shining layer of mana, resembling knightly armor, but not made of iron or steel, but woven from pure light, energy, and strength. The professor himself could not fully understand how the boy had achieved such a level of mastery. He had done it completely on his own, without the support of mentors, without any special privileges or chances of success. But he had still broken through. Raymond's eyes shone with deep pride. He had not just won the victory, he had won it with his own hands, without any help or mercy. However, rage still raged in his heart. Years of pain, humiliation, and injustice burned within him, with a fire that would not let him stop or give up. Only a few minutes passed, and Anton, exhausted and broken, was already lying unconscious on the cold, cruel ground, knocked down by the final, crushing blow. The students and teachers who witnessed this scene froze in complete amazement and silent admiration. None of them expected such an unexpected and dramatic ending. Many people couldn't believe how someone who had been considered a loser for years suddenly turned out to have such incredible strength and will to win. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the cold, slightly irritated voice of Professor Hubert, who sharply asked why everyone was delaying the official announcement of the results. After all, the long-awaited moment had come when the names of the winners of this tense battle should have been recognized. The judge, having no other choice, was forced to submit to this decision. Loudly and clearly, with all due solemnity, he announced, "The winner is Russell Raymond." A new feeling blossomed in Raymond's chest at that moment, a true, deep pride that he had never felt before, and that filled his soul with incredible strength. The referee had already taken a few steps towards him, as was customary, to invite the winner to leave the arena, but Raymond beat him to it, declaring in a sharp and firm voice that he was not finished yet. According to the rules of training fights, the winner has the right to challenge the next opponent, unless he refuses to continue the fight. Those who had mocked and ridiculed him for years suddenly felt a cold fear run down their spines. They were clearly aware that they could become the next targets. Without hesitation, Raymond pointed his finger at one of them, choosing the next target for his rage and desire for justice. The battle continued. His goal wasn't just to win. He wanted to prove to everyone that all their bullying and humiliation had been a huge mistake, and that he was ready to go further. Much further than they could ever imagine. And while the arena was buzzing with noise and excitement after another brilliant victory, in the cozy office, the professor was looking through the records with interest and slight surprise. Raymond already had 14 victories in a row, which spoke of his incredible potential and strength. He could not hide his sincere admiration and simultaneous deep surprise at how subtly and insightfully Daria Snow White felt in him this rare and truly unique talent that distinguished him among hundreds of other students. She saw it in just one brief, almost piercing glance at Raymond. A magic filled with a purity and power that most students at the academy did not possess. On the one hand, the professor was sincerely happy about his rapid development, because he saw in it not just power, but the true potential of a great master capable of changing the course of history. But on the other hand, his mind was constantly playing with disturbing thoughts. How, in such a short time, had this guy been able to reach such incredible heights that seemed unattainable even for the most experienced magicians? It seemed like a true miracle. An almost superhuman feat that went far beyond the limits of ordinary human understanding and perception. Meanwhile, after a grueling day filled with hard training and difficult challenges, Raymond returned to his modest apartment, dreaming of finally finding peace and regaining his strength. Just then, an unexpected message awaited him, which instantly filled his heart with new, bright hope. The mission had been accomplished. A small but extremely impressive artifact appeared in his hands. A strange object that stored all the awards and achievements gained during the last trials. Slowly, with trepidation and respect, he reached inside the artifact, feeling his fingers touch something cold, mysterious, and yet full of power. When he extended his hand, his eyes widened in surprise. In his palm lay a strange, ancient map, on which were depicted many mysterious signs and symbols, beckoning with their riddles. Along with the map came a new task. A mysterious mission directly related to the unknown location marked on the map. Accomplishing this mission promised to open the way for him to the third circle of mana, a long-awaited level of power that had remained unattainable and fabulous for him in his past life. However, the map proved extremely difficult to understand. Its symbols, labels, and geographical features did not evoke any familiar images or associations. Without hesitation, Raymond decided to turn to the main source of knowledge, the professor's huge library, where the oldest and most valuable records and manuscripts were stored. It was there, among the thick, dusty volumes and creaking pages, that he hoped to find at least the slightest hint or clue to the mysterious map. First, he opened a large volume devoted to the outer territories of the Kingdom of Indamon, trying to unravel the mysteries of distant and little-explored lands. The book mentioned legends about the remote, almost forgotten coast of the Empire, a place shrouded in myth, mystery, and ancient mysticism. Raymond then delved into ancient records that detailed the Outer Sea, hoping that it was there that the answer to his most important questions might lie. He worked tirelessly all day long, poring over dozens of pages, comparing maps, deciphering unknown symbols, but never finding a single concrete clue. When he finally left the library, his face reflected deep disappointment. Despite all his efforts, the mystery remained unsolved, like a distant star that he could never touch. Despite all the difficulties and obstacles, Raymond's main and unchanging goal remained one thing. He resolutely sought to reach the third circle at any cost, which symbolized for him a new stage, the opening of new horizons and incredible opportunities in life. Leaving the cool library, where he had spent several hours poring over heavy books, Raymond unexpectedly met the gaze of other students, whose reactions were mixed. Some looked at him with fear, some with obvious envy, and some with a cold, piercing hostility that seemed to penetrate through the skin. At that moment, he felt deep in his heart. The cruel mockery and ridicule that had previously haunted him had finally receded, although the wounds remained, reminding him of the past. Yet even within the walls of this venerable academy, he still felt alien and separated from others, with an inner pain that haunted him and seemed to drag him into the darkness of loneliness. It was at this difficult moment, when it seemed that he was on the verge of despair, that his heart was touched by a warm, gentle, and benevolent voice that seemed to radiate light, hope, and support that could change everything. It was the professor, a man who had long noticed him among the many other students and who never passed by, always finding time to pay attention, listen, and offer sincere support. This time, he invited Raymond into his office, wanting to talk to him in a friendly, informal way, like an old friend. The professor was the only person who looked at him not with judgment, but with a sincere, warm smile, full of compassion, faith in his potential, and an unwavering hope that fueled Raymond and gave him the strength to move forward no matter what. That is why the boy always happily accepted the professor's invitation, because in that cozy office, he could be himself, without fear of being judged or rejected, and open up without fear. That time, they sat together in the soft light of the lamp that gently enveloped the walls of the study to discuss what awaited Raymond in the near future, especially the summer vacation, which was getting closer and closer, and filling his thoughts with anticipation. The professor asked if Raymond had any specific plans for the summer, whether he was just going to relax, engage in self-development, or perhaps join some interesting activities that would help him forge his own path in magic. At first glance, it seemed that the guy had no definite plans or responsibilities. He was silent, as if pondering deep within himself, trying to find the right words, or simply hiding his true intentions. Then the teacher, smiling slightly, offered him a unique opportunity to join an important research project, which he himself had been working on for a long time, and which could be a great start for Raymond's future career, opening up new prospects and connections for him. The professor assured that if the young man could cope well with all the tasks, his name would be included in the list of authors of the scientific work, immediately after the name of the supervisor, and this was a great honor and a chance to declare himself to the entire academic community. However, suddenly Raymond's gaze accidentally fell on a bright magazine lying on the professor's desk, and on its cover an incredible, mesmerizing blue lagoon shone, as if alive, calling and luring him into a world of the unknown, full of mysteries and adventures. At that very moment, an unshakable determination ripened in his soul. He made an important and conscious decision for himself. This is exactly the place he wants to go this summer, and he already knows what he will do in the coming months, leaving behind scientific projects and the usual path. The professor, noticing this, turned to him again, curiously asking what he thought about the project and whether he was ready to join the work, hoping to convince his student. However, Raymond, a little embarrassed and slightly nervous, politely but firmly refused this offer, without immediately explaining the real reasons. He understood that this refusal might seem unexpected. After all, he had other, more personal plans that he didn't want to reveal right now, but which were extremely important and meaningful to him, like a call from the soul. This refusal confused the professor a little, because earlier the guy had said that he was free and had no other obligations or plans for the summer. And this surprise caused him a little excitement. But Raymond did not go into details, leaving this question unanswered. His heart and thoughts were completely occupied with the dream of visiting the same mysterious place that he saw on the cover of the magazine. And this dream burned with a bright flame. He already recognized this familiar place well, which had a special meaning for him, as if it were a symbol of hope, future discoveries, and new beginnings in life that he so desired. These were the Maldives, a paradise on earth, where blue, transparent water gently meets the endless sky, and a warm sea breeze envelops everything around, giving a feeling of absolute harmony and freedom. The next morning, before the first rays of the sun, Raymond set out on a long and adventurous journey, filled with hope, determination, and a thirst for new knowledge that awaited him ahead. Opening the window of his vehicle, he took a deep breath of fresh, sea-scented air, which filled his lungs with a feeling of true freedom, one he hadn't known in a long time and had missed so much. At that moment, he felt an incredible peace and joy that had not visited his soul for a long time, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted from his shoulders and the world had opened up new horizons. However, he understood that a long and difficult path lay ahead of him, and before moving on, he needed to replenish his strength, to feel the nourishment that would fill him with energy and strengthen his spirit. Raymond slowly took out several crystals from his hiding place that held concentrated magical energy, and, gazing thoughtfully at their shimmering brilliance, he took them to quench the sharp hunger that was creeping up on him, and to replenish his internal resources. Suddenly, the driver of the vehicle shuddered, feeling behind him the blaze of incredible heat, filling the air around him with an exciting force and tension that seemed to shatter the silence. It was at this crucial moment that Raymond began his inner work, immersing himself in the complex and concentration-demanding process of conquering the third circle of mana, which required not only strength, but also impeccable control over himself and energy. He focused all his attention, as if dissolving into this goal, allowing energy to circulate freely in his body, unite with his spirit, and become one whole. ready for new accomplishments. By the time he finally arrived in the beautiful Maldives, Raymond had to overcome this invisible but very tangible barrier, a boundary that had become a real obstacle to new knowledge and incredible powers. He knew he simply had to do it, because there was no other way. Meanwhile, the professor was haunted by a strange, disturbing feeling that seemed to sit deep in his soul, sneaking up unexpectedly and giving him no peace, as if warning of something important hidden beyond the horizon. He tried to understand why Raymond had chosen the Maldives for his trip. What was so special and extraordinary that this young man, who had so much hidden potential and determination, was looking for there? However, deep down, the professor clearly felt that this decision was the right one, and that behind it stood something extremely important and fateful, something that would change the course of events, and perhaps even his own fate. After all, it was on these paradise islands, where the smoothness of the sea merges with the endless sky, that the fiery lady Daria lived. A strong, mysterious, and wise magical personality whom Raymond fervently sought to reach, seeking answers and inspiration. As the first morning star gently shone over the endless turquoise waters of the Maldives, Daria Snow White enjoyed a brief but much-needed break. She stood on the terrace of her apartment, gazing at the picturesque views that reminded her of her hometown. Bright, vibrant, full of magic, warmth, and fond memories. She couldn't remember the last time she could afford such true peace. Just to take a deep breath of fresh air, not thinking about politics or the constant combat challenges that never left her for a minute. For too long, her time had been consumed by numerous speeches at magical conferences, defending the Empire from external threats, and endless research into energy manipulation that exhausted both body and spirit. In addition, she daily taught a new generation of chosen, young, and talented magicians who were just beginning the difficult and thorny path of learning magic and themselves. Every day, Daria gave lectures, immersing her students deeply into the secrets of the 8 circles of mana, gradually revealing to them the depths of what magic really is and how to truly wield its power. She explained that these numbers are not just a random order, but a deep symbolism embedded in the very structure of the world and reality surrounding them, and that each circle is a certain stage, challenge, and transformation. The students, holding their breath, caught her every word, captivated not only by her knowledge, but also by the powerful energy she radiated, which was impossible not to feel with all their hearts. The first circle, as she often repeated, is the boundary when the magician first feels the pressure of the surrounding world, beginning to prepare to enter the 9th, last stage, the final transformation, and the highest level of mastery. The second circle symbolizes the completion of the most difficult trials of the 6th circle. This is a boundary that can only be crossed by the strongest and most dedicated magicians, who have earned the title of true masters. And the third circle is at the same time the beginning of a new, independent path, a stage of knowledge and action when the magician stops relying on other people's support and begins to form his own unique power. Daria remembered her lectures, training sessions, and the sincere smiles of her students with special warmth in her heart. But one question kept buzzing inside her that kept her awake for long nights. One thing was constantly on her mind. How was Raymond feeling? Whether everything was okay with him? Whether he was ready for what lay ahead? Because there were difficult trials ahead that would require all his strength and willpower. After all, she was the first to see a magician who was able to reach the 2nd circle in such an extremely short time. It was almost unheard of and aroused sincere admiration and respect. It was at this fateful moment that Raymond had already arrived in the Maldives, standing on the threshold of new adventures and difficult trials that were to completely change his life. The driver who met him at the scene could not hide his surprise, because the young man was in no hurry to get out of the cart. It seemed that he did not have the strength to do it right away. Opening the door, the driver froze in place. What suddenly opened before his eyes genuinely shocked even the experienced man, who did not expect to see such a state in the young magician. Raymond lay exhausted, his body barely obeying his will. But gradually he began to regain consciousness, feeling his consciousness slowly returning, as if awakening from a long sleep. His body screamed for energy, and he greedily consumed food, trying to restore the strength that had been depleted by the incredible workload and difficult magical trials. After all, he had spent too much precious mana trying his best to subdue the new, overpowering energy and tame the burning fire that burned within him, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. The tension was so strong that Raymond even lost consciousness. This unexpected moment frightened not only him, but also the driver, who watched him with anxiety and deep concern. But despite everything, Raymond himself felt deep satisfaction. He had done everything he had planned, and this filled him with inner strength, confidence, and unwavering faith in his own abilities. His will was unwavering, unbreakable, like a rock, and he firmly intended to move forward, not allowing fear or doubt to stop him on this difficult yet exciting path. If he managed to conquer the third circle of mana, then all subsequent challenges, no matter how severe and ruthless they may be, will also be within his power. In just a few months of hard work, Raymond achieved what other magicians could only dream of in years: painstaking training, exhausting efforts, and relentless self-improvement. But even that wasn't enough. His goal lay much further, beyond the usual, more ambitious and larger than anything he could have imagined before. It was not for nothing that fate gave him a second chance. A unique opportunity to correct the mistakes of the past, rewrite the story of his own life, and become what he had always dreamed of being. However, despite all his determination and strength of spirit, he still did not fully understand where he should go next, what path to choose in this vast world with so many unknowns. Suddenly, he heard the voices of tourists and the enthusiastic tone of the tour guide, who told vivid stories about the ancient city, which aroused his curiosity. Raymond quietly joined the group, eager to listen further. The tour guide told with a lively light in his voice how, according to ancient legends, Pompeii was once a simple rock that was destined to become a volcano, but something strange happened. It was in this very place that mythical creatures appeared, forever changing the course of events and the nature of the land. Raymond instantly understood. It was probably the presence of the majestic dragon that radically changed this land, giving it new strength and mystery. In his world, only one creature could have such power: the great ancient red dragon, a symbol of strength, wisdom, and unbreakable will. And it was this dragon that he was looking for, the source of his strength and inspiration that helped him move forward. But instead of listening to the story to the end, Raymond quietly and imperceptibly disappeared from the group, leaving behind only a faint trace in the warm rays of the sun. He disappeared among the tall palm trees and soft, warm sand, and no one even noticed how the silent boy, searching for his own path, had disappeared. Tourists didn't mention him. He remained a shadow, an invisible backdrop for the noisy and cheerful company. The reason he returned here was special and profound. It was on this land that his rapid and extremely rapid development began, born of a multitude of difficult missions and dangerous trials. He felt that all of this was closely connected to the dragon, the source of his strength, his powerful inspiration, and the fire in his heart. This thought filled him with gratitude, and he intended to personally thank this magnificent creature for the second chance given by fate. Suddenly, the map he was holding tightly in his hands began to slowly crumble into small, shining golden particles, as if coming to life in his palm. From these particles burst forth a bright, almost blinding mana, flowing through the air like a living element, its fiery light dancing and shimmering, attracting the eye. It condensed into a small drop that glowed like the most precious jewel, radiating warmth and strength. The drop hung in the air and slowly floated in a certain direction, like a living guide, inviting Raymond to follow it. Raymond instantly understood. This was a sign, his guiding light, pointing the way to the next goal and a new discovery. And this path led to a majestic waterfall, hidden among dense tropical greenery, which seemed to hide secrets and answers to all questions. His logic suggested you need to carefully bypass the waterfall without taking unnecessary risks and continue on, carefully listening to your inner feeling and the voice of your heart. He did not want to waste another second because every moment was worth its weight in gold. Therefore, his choice was quick and unquestionable. He firmly decided to overcome this obstacle without stopping or hesitating for a moment. Using the powerful force of the wind, he concentrated and created a veritable tunnel of air that cut unhindered through the thick and impenetrable wall of water, like a sharp sword cutting through the fog. Then he resolutely jumped inside, without hesitation for a second, completely trusting himself and his strength. On the other side, a huge cave opened up before him, filled with incredible heat and a strange, almost mystical glow. Perhaps it was molten lava, pulsating with bright streams of light, creating the feeling of a living element. The system warned him. This location is only for those who have reached the third circle, and this is a strict restriction that only the bravest can overcome. But despite the silence and the absence of any signs of danger, Raymond felt no threat. No sounds of distant monsters, no insidious traps, not even a faint whiff of danger that might warn of a possible threat. Everything around him seemed calm, as if nature itself had frozen in anticipation of something incomprehensible. Step by step, he moved confidently forward, peering intently into every corner of the mysterious cave. Tall stone columns towered above him like silent giants, holding up the vast roof of the cave with unwavering wisdom. Their massive bodies were covered with cracks and ancient symbols that told stories of forgotten times and the powerful magicians who had once walked here. Raymond slowly touched one of the columns, feeling the coldness of the stone, which seemed to absorb all the antiquity and power of this place. Running his fingers over its surface, he pondered thoughtfully. How many centuries had they stood here, silent witnesses to the endless events that had taken place here? How many travelers and warriors had crossed this threshold? Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a faint movement. Glimpses of strange light flickering in the shadows between the columns. This flickering glow seemed to beckon him to something unknown, hidden deep in the darkness. Looking back, he saw the Golden Gate, majestic, massive, framed by intricate patterns and luxurious carvings. They looked as if time had stopped here. In front of the gate stood two indomitable guards. Their gazes were watchful and stern, as if they had seen everything that was happening around and would not allow any trespassers to enter. Without the slightest fear, with the awareness of his own strength and confidence, Raymond moved forward, his steps clear and decisive, like the blow of a hammer on the anvil of fate. With each step, the atmosphere became more and more tense. Even the air seemed to constrict around him, and the cave itself held its breath, preparing for something unknown and perhaps terrifying. And suddenly, behind him, he felt a powerful, dense mass of mana, piercing the air with its terrifying energy. It was so dense that it seemed as if the darkness itself had come to life and threatened to devour him at any moment. Raymond remembered for a moment that he had never been so careless, even in the most brutal of times, when he was a mercenary and every step could be his last. The greatest danger lies in the calm before the storm, and he knew this better than anyone else. After all, when there is no noise, monsters, or any sounds, it can only mean one thing. You have stepped into predator territory, where the threat lurks in silence, and just one mistake can cost you your life. Looking back, Raymond saw a huge Komodo lizard, its skin glistening as if carved from stone, its eyes glittering as if it were watching his every move. Its powerful jaws slowly opened, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The monster gave him no time to think. With lightning speed, it rushed into the attack, like a deadly shadow obscuring the light. But Raymond was ready. His reaction worked instantly, like lightning, and he had time to react, preventing the monster from seizing the initiative. He jumped sharply to the side, avoiding the fatal blow that could have ended his life in an instant. He felt adrenaline pulsing through his veins, every nerve in his body tense to the limit. Before him stood a creature that only 2 full squads of elite mercenaries, united in mortal combat, could handle. Its strength, speed, and endurance were extraordinary. At that moment, Raymond realized that the fight would be unequal and merciless, and the best thing he could do was run for his life. Without time to think, he instantly decided to use the Awakening the Mummy spell, a complex and cunning technique that was supposed to distract the monster and give it a chance to escape. At the same time, he began to prepare the Lightning Bolt spell. He clenched his fingers, gathering all his internal energy, filling his palm with concentrated power, ready to explode at any moment. The lizard noticed the movement, and with its mouth open, pounced on him again, leaving no chance for error or retreat. But Raymond was ready. The arrow's energy pulsed in his hand, ready to explode and destroy the threat. He cast a spell. The arrow flew out with a loud explosion of light and a powerful sound, like thunder, that shattered the silence of the clear sky. The charge hit the monster directly in the nostril, releasing a powerful electrical discharge that pierced the lizard's entire body, paralyzing it for a few precious seconds. This electric shock was unexpected and devastating for the monster, giving Raymond the long-awaited time to escape. Taking advantage of this moment, he rushed towards the stone gate, which now seemed to him to be his only salvation. He ran as fast as he had ever run before, feeling every heartbeat echoing in his chest, and the rumble of danger and pursuit behind him. But suddenly, his path was blocked by mysterious guardians. Huge creatures made of magic and stone, who made a single demand: to prove their worth with the help of magic. This surprised and outraged Raymond. Aren't gates supposed to protect against threats, not pose additional challenges to those already trying to pass through them? While he was trying to unravel their intentions and find out what tests and demands these mysterious guards were putting before him, the lizard was already inexorably approaching, practically catching up with him. leaving no chance of escape or avoidance. At this crucial moment, it became clear to him. He would not be able to escape the battle. The trials had already begun, and now he would have to fight without any chance of retreat. Raymond hesitated for a long time, feeling the pressure of responsibility and fear of the unknown. But in the end, he made a firm and conscious decision. Not to retreat or hide from danger, but on the contrary, to fight, win, and continue on his path to new achievements. Gathering all his strength, Raymond took a deep breath and focused his inner mana, gathering it in the deepest recesses of his spirit. He channeled the energy into a point of concentration, as if forging a magical arrowhead, a bright, burning, and hot arrow of fire, glowing with living flame, ready to tear apart any obstacle in its path. His eyes were burning with determination, the light of magic reflected in them like fire in the darkness, and he himself felt an unshakable confidence in his abilities. Gathering his will into a fist, Raymond bravely rushed forward in a swift attack, leaving himself no chance of defeat or doubt. Suddenly, the stone in the gate began to fill with soft but strong vibrations, as if it was breathing the most powerful mana energy, which burst out in waves, pulsating and filling the space around it with extraordinary power. This incredibly powerful aura of mana caused real fear in the monster, which suddenly stopped its movement, as if sensing an imminent threat looming over it. The lizard was backing away, its gaze becoming tense and anxious, its movements more cautious. The monster was clearly beginning to show signs of the fear that had previously seemed invincible. Raymond watched the change in the opponent's behavior with amazing astonishment, not understanding at first what exactly caused this turn of events and why the monster suddenly stopped attacking. But suddenly the lizard raised its head, and its eyes instantly lit up with understanding. It was preparing to deliver the final, decisive blow that could change everything. Suddenly, she slammed her paw sharply on the ground, causing powerful shocks that spread in waves, causing the ground to shake and the air around her to fill with a heavy, viscous tension that seemed almost material. But surprisingly, after this strong gesture, the giant creature suddenly stopped and made no further movement, as if in thought. As if its control over the situation had suddenly wavered, or it had lost the will to continue the attack. On the contrary, the monster slowly bowed before Raymond, showing a sign of respect and recognition of his strength and dignity. Raymond was left shocked and even a little confused. How could it be that such a terrible creature, capable of destroying him with a single blow, showed him respect? Why was he the one destined to receive such recognition? The guards standing on both sides of the gate silently lowered their weapons and, without further ado, retreated, removing the obstacle before the daredevil. They unmistakably felt that before them stood a man who truly deserved to continue on his path, despite all the dangers that lay ahead. The gate slowly opened, emitting a bright and dazzling glow that seemed almost otherworldly, like a portal between worlds. The light was so intense that Raymond could not stand it and felt his consciousness recede. He lost consciousness. When he woke up, he felt a throbbing, sharp pain in his head that kept him awake and made every breath difficult. Opening his eyes, he at first could not believe what he saw. A cold, lifeless, icy space reigned around him, where there was not a hint of life or movement. In the circle stood motionless figures, huge ice golems that seemed frozen in time, like stone giants frozen in eternal silence. Over time, he realized that he had been transported to a completely different place, probably an underground ice cave filled with frost, silence, and a sense of isolation. Suddenly, Raymond's attention was caught by a bright flash that appeared behind him. Looking back, he saw the enormous finger of a dragon protruding from the wall, petrified, motionless, like a monument to the greatness and past of this incredible creature. At that moment, a message sounded in his mind, like the voice of fate, a new challenge. To defeat the ice golems using only fire. Another difficult task lay ahead. To destroy these cold, unyielding monsters using only fire magic, without any other means or assistance. Raymond looked around in horror, noticing how the ice golem figures began to slowly move and come back to life. One by one, these massive creatures came to life, ready to engage in mortal combat. Fear awoke in his soul. How could he, alone, face so many enemies who seemed almost invincible? However, he gathered all his mana into his palm, feeling the power pulsate and build up within him, as if charging his will and determination. Although his body was on the verge of exhaustion, his spirit remained unwavering. Raymond was determined to fight to the end. He began to throw fiery arrows, flying one after another, like precise and deadly arrows of fate, each hitting the enemy's weakest spot. His blows were extremely accurate and incredibly powerful, Each fiery flash ignited the hearts of the golems, destroying them from within. The fire that blazed in his hands was both a weapon and a symbol of an indomitable spirit that could not be destroyed by either cold or darkness. After all, the only way to destroy the golem was to destroy its magical core, the source of its strength, life, and invincibility. It was what kept it in this icy form, like a heart that never stopped beating inside its cold armor. However, the task proved extremely difficult and almost impossible, as the magical core was protected by a super strong shield, pulsing with powerful energy. This protection was invisible, but almost impenetrable to any attacks. The golems were covered in thick, almost impenetrable ice armor, which made any direct attack useless. Even the most powerful fiery blow left only thin, shimmering cracks on it, which immediately began to heal under the cold breath of magic. Raymond looked at these fragile cracks, realizing that the ice here was not just water, but a real element, strong and cold, resistant to fire. And this greatly complicated the task. He felt that every bit of his firepower was almost powerless against such a steadfast defense. And this forced him to seek another approach. Realizing that fire could not penetrate the golem's hearts directly, Raymond decided to try another element, wind, which could weaken this protection, heat it up, and break the ice armor into small fragments. But as soon as he tried to summon wind magic, he suddenly felt an invisible obstacle, something like an invisible barrier blocking his spell, preventing him from freely controlling the element. This mysterious force, like a magical trap, limited his possibilities, leaving only the use of fire open, the only element that could be used here. At that moment, one of the golems, sensing his indecision, abruptly rushed into the attack, breaking his concentration and knocking him off balance. Raymond tried to summon a lightning bolt, but his words stuck in his throat. The magic refused him, as if the very nature of this cave did not want him to use another element. The spells did not come out of his lips. The energy seemed to freeze inside, giving no way out. It was a moment of powerless attempts and despair. The golem lunged straight at him with unprecedented force, delivering a powerful punch that nearly knocked Raymond off his feet. Barely managing to dodge, jumping aside to avoid the fatal blow, his body was still injured, and a sharp pain shot through his muscles and bones. However, the pain did not break his spirit. On the contrary, it reminded him that this was only a test, and that he must hold on to the end. It was then that Raymond remembered the strict rule of this test. It could only be passed with the help of fire magic, without any extraneous elements or tricks. He realized that the magical barrier around this cave prevented him from using other elements, limiting him to the only way: fire. The golems did not give him any peace. They rushed to the attack again, and one of them struck with such force that Raymond flew several meters in the air and then hit the cold ground hard. Enemies surrounded him on all sides, creating a real trap, seemingly with no chance of rescue or escape. But despite the pain, injuries, and danger, he did not give up. An unbreakable determination burned in his eyes that was stronger than any fear or weakness. Clenching his fists, he began to search for a way out of this hopeless situation, searching his heart and mind for any opportunity for maneuver. And then Raymond made an extremely risky and bold decision: to use a pillar of fire, one of the most powerful and dangerous spells in the art of fire magic, which only the strongest magician could summon. Although it seemed almost impossible, and the price of failure could be fatal, he was willing to risk everything to achieve victory and continue on his path. Even though there were twice as many enemies, and they were several times larger than him, Raymond believed in his own strength, in his fire, which could melt even the iciest resistance. He relentlessly shaped streams of mana, transforming them into fiery arrows that burned in his hands like veritable pieces of pure sunlight. With these arrows, he fired relentlessly at the golems, accurately hitting their magical cores, delivering deadly blows one after another, each shot strengthening his hope and confidence. Finally, after a series of powerful shots, a huge explosion tore the sky apart, shaking the earth so violently that it seemed as if nature itself stood up to watch the battle. Using the golems against each other, Raymond fought his way through the crowd, maneuvering between the colossal monsters and moving towards the main objective: the central core. His goal was clear and unwavering: to reach the heart of the enemy and deliver a decisive blow that would destroy them once and for all. And finally, having found himself very close to the pulsating core, he, without any hesitation, fired a flaming arrow at it, containing all his strength, will, and magical energy. The power of the explosion caused the golems to lose consciousness, falling to the ground and shattering into numerous fragments that glittered in the light. However, there were still two giant golems ahead who were not going to stop their attack and rushed forward with furious aggression. His mana reserves were rapidly depleting, and Raymond understood that without a new, more effective strategy, he would not be able to finish the battle. But he wasn't going to give up. On the contrary, he was feverishly looking for a way to defeat two enemies at once with a simultaneous, powerful attack. He needed a radical, unconventional approach, something unexpected that could give him an advantage even in this critical situation. He was well aware that breaking through the thick, almost impenetrable ice armor of each golem required not just strength, but a colossal concentration of all his magical energy. So he decided to focus all his mana on one point, gather it like a beam of light in a lens, and deliver a precise, powerful blow that could break through the ice shell and shatter the enemy's magical core. At this moment, an epiphany came to him. True strength is not in the amount of energy scattered around, but in the ability to concentrate as much as possible, to gather everything into one whole and direct it at the decisive moment. At first, he backed away sharply, quickly but without panic, to buy time and cast the necessary spell without unnecessary obstacles that could break his concentration. When the distance became safe, Raymond focused completely. His mind was freed from all extraneous thoughts. Only one goal pulsated in his heart: to win. He began to accumulate all his remaining mana, feeling the energy build in his hands, pulsing and heating up, like a volcano about to erupt. A moment later, he released a fiery arrow, bright and blazing, surpassing even the midday sun in light, concentrating into a narrow, swift ball of flame. To enhance its effect and prevent the energy from dissipating, he used a complex amplification formula, knowledge that had come to him with difficulty, but now had become crucial. However, he did not stop there. He activated the doubling the Pillar of Fire spell, doubling its power and making this arrow truly devastating. Then he carefully applied a second layer of mana, stabilizing and further enhancing the attack so that the arrow remained solid and focused, like a dagger that would cut through any armor. All that remained was to focus on holding the spell and preparing for the golem's attack. If he could combine all this power, there would be a chance to destroy both enemies at once. The final step was the creation of the energy compression formula, a technique that allowed for the compression of enormous power into a tiny but deadly charge. He began to shape it in his palms, feeling how every second brought him closer to the limit. After all, every moment was a matter of life and death. His body began to tremble from the tension, pain piercing every muscle like a burning knife. He had never before expended so much magical power at once, and it was incredibly exhausting. And it was at this most critical moment that one of the golems suddenly lunged at him, its massive arms swinging out, preparing a devastating blow capable of crushing a man. Raymond, gathering all his will into a fist, was not afraid, but shouted with all his might, trying to squeeze his mana even faster. There was catastrophically little time left. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, blood pulsating in my veins like hot lava about to burst out. And he succeeded. The blow of the flaming arrow pierced the golem at the last moment, stopping its devastating swing and knocking it off course. Moreover, part of the force hit another golem standing nearby, hitting its magic core and damaging its armor. Large holes formed in their chests where the magic cores had been, and their massive bodies began to fall to the ground, scattering into icy rubble and shards of stone. Raymond could not believe his eyes. He had really managed to break through the defenses of these powerful creatures. He not only won, but also reached new depths of magical art, going far beyond what he had previously thought possible. His understanding of fire magic has deepened significantly, opening the way to new possibilities and ways to use the force. And suddenly, he felt a new, powerful force begin to flow through him, close to the magic of the fifth circle, which he had only heard about in legends. As soon as he gripped the spear-like magic core in his palm, his mana began to rapidly drain, as if the energy was being torn into numerous pieces, leaving his body on the verge of exhaustion. However, instead of waiting and complaining about his strength, he made a firm, decisive decision to act first, to attack while the enemy was weak. Instantly gathering himself, he rushed into a decisive attack on the last golems, without wasting a second, giving himself completely to the battle. His gaze burned with unwavering determination. He knew that this test must be passed at all costs, even if it meant paying the ultimate price. The golems fell one after another, like mighty trees falling, their gigantic bodies crashing loudly against the ground, and icy rubble flying in all directions. However, it seemed that their ranks were endless, that the offensive would still continue, and there would be no victory. Gathering all his attention and strength, Raymond counted. 4 more golems remained ahead. 4 more trials that had to be overcome. The merciless attack resumed, blow after blow, and all that remained of the mighty creatures were fragments of icy stone flying in all directions. Only 2 enemies remained, and they rushed into a final fierce battle, ready to use all their strength to destroy him. His strength was almost exhausted. His body was exhausted. But not even for a moment did the thought of retreat or defeat enter his mind. With his last strength and last will, he pierced his enemies, his blows becoming faster and more accurate, leaving them no chance of escape or retreat. Fiery magic burned in his hands, filling every movement with strength and determination, and in his heart, with unbreakable faith in victory. He believed in his own strength, confidently looking into the eyes of his enemies and believing that he would be able to deal with these 2 golems as easily as with all the previous ones, because he had already defeated much more formidable opponents more than once. And indeed, the first blow was extremely successful. He was able to destroy one of the giants, feeling a fire of confidence and determination burning in his chest, as if each fragment of the ice monster gave him new strength. However, suddenly a disturbing voice arose in his mind. The second golem was still standing, and within it he could feel a living, pulsating presence of mana that troubled him and aroused suspicion. The ease with which he had laid down his first enemy seemed too easy to be true. Looking back for a moment, he saw that another golem was already standing behind him, huge as a mountain, frozen in time to strike. If it weren't for his lightning-fast reaction and agility, which allowed him to raise his spear in time and block the devastating blow, Raymond could have died on the spot, before he even had time to understand what had happened. But his mana energy was almost exhausted. He managed to destroy an entire army of enemies, giving all his strength and reaching the point of his own exhaustion. Desperately looking for a way out of this difficult situation, he feverishly pondered how to finish off the last 2 golems, because there was nowhere to retreat. Behind him was an abyss, and ahead was only icy death. In despair and fatigue, he made the most extreme and decisive decision: to make a last desperate attempt that could change the course of this bloody battle. Concentrating all the remaining mana in his palm, which was already barely holding on, he began to form an even more powerful fiery arrow, which emitted not just heat, but a real burning flame, capable of melting even the strongest ice. He took a deep breath and aimed. His goal was clear and distinct: to destroy both enemies at once with one powerful, stunning blow, to end the battle. This was his last hope, his last chance to win where it seemed impossible to win. Gathering all his strength and will, he threw the arrow with such speed and force that it cut through the air like a spear and overcame any obstacles in its path, leaving a trail of burning fire behind it. Now all that remained was to wait, with bated breath, to see if his desperate move would actually prove successful, because even the strongest magic sometimes failed at the most crucial moment. Suddenly, a thick fog rose around, instantly swallowing everything in sight. Nothing was visible, only the faint smell of sulfur and burning embers from the arrow. His heart was pounding wildly, as if the universe had entered a moment of calm before a storm. And only when the fog began to slowly dissipate did an incredible sight appear before his eyes. An arrow had passed through both golems, leaving them fallen, destroyed, and powerless. His vision began to dim, and his body swayed, treacherously losing strength. The exhaustion accumulated over years of training and battles was now taking its toll, covering him in a heavy wave. But even when the world around him began to dim, and his consciousness teetered on the verge of fainting, he was certain victory had already been won, because the fire in his heart had not gone out. With his last breath, he fell to the cold ground, completely exhausted, but with a sense of triumph pulsing through every cell of his body. The mission was accomplished, and as a reward, he received the Forgotten Horn of the King, an artifact of incredible power and ancient wisdom. As soon as Raymond lost consciousness, the king's forgotten horn began to tremble rapidly, emitting powerful pulses of mana that enveloped everything around. The chains that held him firmly chained to the pedestal snapped, one by one, with a sharp, piercing sound of metal breaking, as if the stone itself had yielded to his force. The next moment, the horn itself burst into flames. Flames engulfed its surface, as if consuming and transforming it into something new, incomprehensible and incredible. The fire suddenly turned into a blinding light that spread around, filling the space with a brightness almost on a par with the midday sun on the hottest day of summer. From this bright glow, a halo aura began to emerge, gradually enveloping Raymond's body, like an invisible light covering that protected and filled him with strength. It was not just light, it penetrated deep into his consciousness, immersing him in the memories of an ancient and forgotten king who who had once ruled these lands, seeking to pass on his powerful legacy to the Chosen One. Waking up, Raymond found himself in a strange, unfamiliar place, as if he had fallen into another dimension, devoid of familiar forms, laws of nature, and time. His body was bound in gleaming golden chains that pulsed with pure, nourishing mana, as if they breathed with him and held him not for shackles, but for a greater purpose. Suddenly, an unexpected deep voice sounded in the air. "This is the king's horn, not just a reward from a fire dragon." Raymond raised his eyebrows in surprise and was a little disappointed, because outwardly it looked like an ordinary artifact, not a grand trophy. But the voice continued, as if reading his thoughts, explaining that he was the one who had passed the trial by fire, and had attained the mindset of a sacred being, which was far more than mere strength. These words seemed to echo directly in his head, creating a weight and pressure in his mind so powerful that he felt as if he might lose touch with reality. The voice announced that it was granting him a fragment of the essence of the king himself, a priceless gift that combined power, wisdom, and responsibility. And suddenly, this fragment began to gradually materialize, slowly and inevitably heading towards Raymond's stomach, like an invisible arrow penetrating deep inside, awakening a new power. The penetration of the magical fragment into Raymond's body was accompanied by unbearable pain that seemed boundless and deep, as if his very flesh and bones were resisting an unknown, powerful force that was slowly and inevitably penetrating him from within. Every inch of his body seemed to be breaking and cracking. His bones felt unbearable pressure, and his heart was beating with frantic force, as if it wanted to burst out of his chest and rush out to save him from what was happening. This whole process resembled a terrifying yet beautiful claw that slowly but steadily penetrated the flesh, sinking deeper and deeper, and leaving behind a trail of magical transformation. The mana within him began to burn and burn, like the fire of an ancient deity that had long slept and was now awakening, investing its immense, restless power in him. The voice that echoed in his mind was both gentle and menacing. "Use my power. Now it has become a part of you, your weapon and your duty." And at that moment, a majestic, grandiose figure appeared before him, a giant red dragon standing proudly, covered in a fiery glow, its eyes staring intently at Raymond, as if testing his strength, his willingness to accept the gift of such incredible power. Then everything went dark. When Raymond came to, he was lying on the warm, fine-grained sand that pressed lightly against his skin, and ahead of him, the endless waves of a calm, gentle sea whispered softly in the sunlight. His head was heavy, as if full of stones. His body ached to the very heart, as if every muscle was burning from overexertion, and he couldn't even immediately understand where he was, whether this was another dream or a nightmare. Every attempt to get up caused a searing pain. His muscles burned like he had run hundreds of kilometers without rest. Barely lifting his head, he realized with surprise that he was in the Maldives, among endless turquoise waters, a gentle breeze, and warm, gentle, sunny weather that enveloped him like the embrace of an old friend. Touching his cold forehead, trying to remember what exactly had happened, he looked around in confusion, trying to find some answer in this idyllic beauty. Suddenly, bright, almost transparent magical messages began to appear before his eyes, as if in a game, announcing his great success. You have successfully increased your level of mastery of the fire element. The assigned mission has been completed. New opportunities have opened up. Clenching his fist, he ran his hand over his skin, feeling how much mana was still left in his body. And at the same moment, he felt a surge of new, fresh strength filling every cell. His body was instantly enveloped in a powerful, bright glow. It was pure, concentrated mana, pulsing and infusing him with new energy, as if granting him a second life. He could hardly believe his own feelings. It was a true miracle that opened the door to the fourth circle of magic, to a new, deeper, and more powerful form of elemental control. His heart was filled with joy and pride, because this award surpassed all his wildest expectations and gave him faith in his own strength. At that moment, a gentle but confident female voice came from behind him. It was filled with warmth and knowledge, like a ray of light piercing through the fog. The voice said that it had known for a long time where he would find him, right here in this strange world. Raymond turned around and was surprised to see Daria Snow White in front of him. Her eyes shone with wisdom and deep concern. She seemed to be the embodiment of strength and peace at the same time. She explained that she felt a strong surge of mana that changed the space around her. So, she decided to personally check what happened in this place. Upon seeing Raymond, she was sincerely happy for his successes and achievements. Her smile was bright and supportive. Raymond thanked her for her concern and admitted that he had not expected to see her here, but this unexpected meeting had brought him deep joy and hope. Daria carefully examined him, her gaze instantly catching that he had almost reached the level of the fourth circle of magic. His mana had become purer, stronger, more balanced even. She enthusiastically noted that these changes confirm his genius, willpower, and incredible potential, which is only beginning to be revealed. With curiosity, she asked what exactly brought him here, to this unusual and cozy place, whether he was looking for rest or something more. Then she added that not many people know that the Maldives is her home, where she draws inspiration and strength. This information amazed Raymond. He had no idea that Daria had such a deep connection with this beautiful land, which now seemed even closer and more familiar to him. Daria said that she comes here every summer to regain strength and gain wisdom, but even she couldn't explain why this time he was here, at this moment in their lives. Raymond wondered if he should tell her the truth, all his true motives, fears, and goals that had brought him here, to this breaking point. However, he realized that it was too early to reveal all the cards. He needed to keep some of the secrets to himself until he was confident in his abilities and intentions. So he replied that he had come here simply to admire the beauty of the world, to take a break from the relentless hustle and bustle, and to find peace of mind. Although in his heart, he felt more than just a desire for rest. Daria thought for a moment, as if testing his words, and then suddenly announced that she wanted to test his abilities in practice. She wanted to see how far he had come and what he was capable of doing. Without a second's delay, she turned to him for help, which was both a test and a chance. Without waiting for an answer, she snapped her fingers, and suddenly, fire magic instantly besieged Raymond, changing his clothes into official battle attire. Strong, shiny, with runes of power glowing with a soft red light that resembled the flames of living fire. It was a truly incredible sight. Flames literally began to form around Raymond, enveloping his body in a complex and bright costume that shone with living tongues of fire. The fire didn't just glow, it lived and breathed, like a fiery spirit that became an integral part of him, giving him power and protection at the same time. The most important detail on this new image was the symbol of the Tower of Fire that appeared on his chest. Large and bright, it glowed with a hot red light, reminding him of his membership in a powerful guild and the incredible power that now pulsed within him. Daria, noticing Raymond's excitement, smiled softly and reassured him, telling him that he had no reason to worry. She was absolutely confident in his abilities and knew that he would be able to complete this task because she saw his potential. Suddenly, a bright magical message appeared before Raymond, glowing in the air. Help Daria free the prisoners from the pirate ship. Daria explained that in the world of Endymion, slavery is strictly prohibited and punished with the harshest sanctions. It is one of the greatest crimes against freedom and dignity. They could not allow a pirate ship carrying such criminals to dock on the Maldivian shores with impunity and escape justice. She added that although she could have handled the task on her own, now they needed joint, coordinated work, because this operation required clear coordination and a well-thought-out plan. The release of the prisoners and the simultaneous capture of the ship required maximum precision, speed, and surprise. No movement could be accidental. Daria warned that to complete the mission, they would have to appear as ordinary tourists. In no case should they arouse suspicion until the time came for a surprise attack. Raymond deeply realized, if the mistress of the fire tower herself turned to him for help, then the matter was truly serious and responsible. He understood that Daria's authority in the world of magicians was limitless. Her words had weight, and her request could not be ignored by anyone. Therefore, the fact that she chose him was an honor for Raymond, and a sign that they saw something truly special and unique in him. This task was much more than a normal mission. It was a true test of his abilities, willpower, and willingness to make decisions in the most difficult circumstances. While he was pondering all of Daria's words and trying to clear his mind, they had already approached the coast, where a pirate ship proudly flaunted itself at anchor. Black, large, with waving flags with symbols of fear. Daria warned in all seriousness that what he would see on board might seem cruel and even terrifying. This scene was far from being for the faint of heart. She recalled that the path of a defender was always not easy. It was their sacred duty to stand guard over justice, even when faced with darkness and suffering. With these words, Daria took a sharp step forward, her movements graceful and light, like a bird soaring into the sky. And indeed, in a moment, she flew sharply into the air, leaving behind a trail of bright, fiery radiance. She was the embodiment of a fiery sail, carrying her to her goal. Her plan was simple, but extremely effective, to distract the enemies with her brilliance and power, while Raymond took on the most important task, freeing the prisoners. She explained to him clearly and in detail all the details of the upcoming operation, emphasizing the importance of discipline and speed. And then, like a fiery blade, flew straight to the ship. Her words echoed in Raymond's head for a long time, filling him with determination and inspiration, strengthening his faith in his own strength. Meanwhile, she soared over the water, light and graceful, like a real bird of flame emerging from the blue depths of the sea. From a safe distance, she began to gather her strength, concentrating all the strength in every cell of her body, preparing for a powerful blow. Her eyes turned white, as if illuminated by an inner fire, and her body was filled with a powerful surge of mana, making her practically invincible and extremely dangerous to enemies. And in a moment of absolute silence, when nothing around gave away any danger, she shouted sharply and loudly that his time had come. As if at the call of an invisible force, it instantly unleashed all its power. The ship's deck exploded in bright flames that quickly began to cover all surfaces, spreading heat and flying sparks around. The pirates on deck rushed in all directions, trying to extinguish the flames. But the fire only grew, like a wild storm, resisting any of their efforts. The fire rose higher and higher, spreading into wide tongues of flame that enveloped people, burning and engulfing them in a terrible and relentless embrace of death. This fire was a real madman. In its tongues, it seemed, little firemen were dancing, running around the deck with wild laughter, mercilessly burning everything they touched. And it was at that moment that Daria decided not to hold back. She used her signature technique, the one that always left enemies without any chance of salvation. This technique had a bizarre and even disturbing name, the Burning Tree Dwarf. Only those who had seen it with their own eyes at least once could realize the full, terrifying power of this spell. At the same time, Raymond did not waste a minute. His movements were fast, coordinated, and ruthless, because every second could be decisive and change the course of events. With one powerful, jerky leap, he found himself aboard the ship, completely focused on one single goal: to fulfill all of Daria's orders, even if it cost him his life. His heart was pounding wildly in his chest. Adrenaline was pumping through his veins. Every movement was precise and focused, as the realization of the importance of the task tightened his will, leaving no chance for retreat. But as soon as he raised his head up, he froze in place, as if time had stopped. A picture opened before him that struck him to the depths of his soul and brought him to the verge of admiration and fear. Everything around was ablaze with bright flames that spread quickly and furiously, devouring the wooden deck that a few moments ago he had trusted as a solid and unbreakable foundation. This flame flared up so rapidly that now even the air around it seemed to be on fire, and the scorching heat pressed against the skin, leaving the feeling of the burning sun right in the middle of the cold ocean. He was stunned and fascinated at the same time. He had never before seen Daria's magic in such a primal, uncontrolled force, one that seemed to have a life of its own and was not subject to any limitations. After all, this magic has long become a legend among magicians and ordinary people. Once Daria destroyed an entire castle to the ground, leaving not a single stone crumb of it. It was both an incredible and terrifying force, which she kept under control, like a wild beast on a thin but strong chain, ready to break free at any moment. And it was he, an ordinary student, who was accidentally brought to this place in time by fate, who had the incredible happiness and at the same time the horror of witnessing such a grandiose spectacle that was etched in his memory forever. The fire flared up with incredible force. The heat was so intense that it could be felt even from a great distance, as if the deck had turned into a bright, blazing sun, consuming everything around it with its relentless, scorching light. When Raymond saw the enemy's body literally engulfed in flames, and it instantly burst into flames, he was so stunned that for a while he lost his orientation and forgot about everything that was happening around him. But he was not the only one. Everyone on the ship witnessed this terrible spectacle and froze in terrible tension and fear, unable to take their eyes off the burning body, which was turning into a pile of black coals. But despite the shock and fear, Russell did not allow himself to give in to emotions and become confused. He instantly remembered the important task that Daria had assigned him and realized that any doubts or fears were a luxury he could not afford right now. All thoughts were focused on immediate action, because at stake were not just the lives of individual people, but the outcome of an entire case, on which the safety of a much wider community depended. Meanwhile, alarming sounds began to come from the depths of the ship. Distant screams, restless stomping of feet, the rumble and clank of metal. All of this resembled a harbinger of the approach of a new, even greater danger. One of the guards, who had been keeping a close watch on the prisoners, noticed that the chandelier hanging above his head suddenly began to sway eerily. His heart sank, a clear sign of the instability of the situation on the ship, and he felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Those in the metal cages felt these changes, as if their survival instinct had awakened, and they began to scream louder, breaking free and fighting against the bars. Their eyes shone with hope, realizing that the ship had been attacked by enemies, and this might be their long-awaited chance for release. But the guard, realizing that he might lose control, abruptly set about suppressing even the slightest spark of hope in the prisoners' hearts. He walked around the cages, menacingly waving his sword, threatening and frightening each of them. His cold and muffled voice echoed over the deck, making hearts freeze. Any attempt to escape would be punished in the most cruel way, and no one would leave this dungeon alive. He explained in detail and cruelly that escape was impossible, and that anyone who dared to do so would face death. And his every word weighed on the soul, intensifying the prisoner's sense of hopelessness. But at the most critical moment, when the guard was most confident in his power and control over the situation, he was suddenly grabbed by the neck from behind. The surprise froze him in complete immobility. He didn't even have time to make a sound. The attacker turned out to be Raymond, a young man who had proven more than once that he was not afraid to take risks. And now, without hesitation, he used lightning magic, aimed directly at the enemy's body. The electric discharge that cut through the darkness instantly made the guard clench his teeth convulsively from incredible pain. His muscles began to contract uncontrollably, and his eyes filled with horror. With each passing second, the guard felt as if an inner fire had ignited within him. His skin darkened, becoming almost black. His breathing became heavier and rarer, as if life itself was slowly fading away. Raymond, firmly knowing that no one was rising from above and that it was time to act decisively, released the guard, confidently preparing for the next steps. Inside the cages, those who had almost lost hope could no longer contain their emotions. Their voices rose in a mighty scream that filled the entire space of the deck, like the sound of freedom returning to them after a long darkness. These desperate cries from the cages pierced deep into Raymond's heart, awakening in him a burning fire of determination. Every sound was a cry for help, for freedom, for life that fought even in the darkest captivity. In his chest boiled a desire not just to save these people, but to defend their dignity, to protect those who had almost lost hope. Despite the intense inner tension, fear, and excitement that threatened to paralyze his mind, Raymond managed to pull himself together. He took a deep breath, gathering his will into a fist, and in a calm but firm voice addressed the prisoners. "Remain calm. Don't lose your heads. The time to act will soon come. We will choose the right moment, and then we will free you all." His words, filled with confidence and strength, were a real breath of fresh air for the prisoners. Long years of hopelessness and suffering receded for a moment, and a spark of hope was ignited in their hearts, which still flickered even in the darkest days. Meanwhile, Russell looked around the narrow, cramped room where the prisoners were held. The walls seemed to hang over them, squeezing the space and turning this cell into a veritable hell. Damp, cramped, dark, filled with despair and pain. But the biggest blow for him was that among these unfortunate people were very young children. Defenseless, scared, with tears in their eyes, not understanding why they had been taken from their families and kept in such a terrible place. Their tiny hands clenched into fists, and their eyes radiated pain and horror. They had no protection, dignity, or right to childhood. It was impossible to imagine that these little souls, filled with purity and naivety, were mercilessly sold and kept in such conditions, as if they were ordinary goods in the market, which could be bought or sold without remorse. With anger pulsing through every cell of his body, Russell gritted his teeth. He no longer saw these children as mere captives. He saw them as defenseless victims, betrayed and doomed to torment. And a cold fire burned in his soul to punish anyone who had been involved in their fate. Suddenly, a sharp noise came from the deck as several pirates returned to investigate the situation on the ship. Their footsteps echoed off the wood, their voices filled with suspicion and anger. Looking around, they noticed Raymond, a young man standing alone, filled with determination, and this caused them mixed feelings, from fear to outright surprise. They could not believe their eyes. This small, seemingly tiny boy was able to mortally wound one of their strongest guards. and it seemed to them something supernatural and incomprehensible. One of the pirates instantly realized that the situation was getting out of control. He jumped up, shouted loudly, and instantly drew his sword, preparing for a lightning-fast and brutal fight. Together with two comrades, they rushed into the attack, impetuously, ruthlessly, and with the intention of quickly subduing Raymond, unaware that they were dealing not with an ordinary man, but with a magician whose power could change the course of the battle. But Raymond, filled with anger at the suffering and injustice he had seen of the innocent, rushed into battle without hesitation. His movements were swift, confident, and relentless. He gave his enemies no chance for error or retreat. Concentrating all his mana, he summoned a second-level mana circle, a powerful, pulsating chain of lightning that circled around him, ready to strike at any moment when enemies approached. Having struck the enemies with the first lightning bolt, Raymond began to slowly and decisively approach them, his every step confident and ruthless. And the lightning bolts enhanced the effect and fear of his opponents. The enemies, lying on the ground, oppressed and exhausted, barely able to utter a word, began to realize that they were dealing with the creature they feared most of all, a sorcerer, whose name was synonymous with death and terror. When they, trying to somehow restore their fighting spirit, tried to raise their threatening tone, Raymond cruelly and mercilessly finished them off with another lightning strike, leaving no chance of rescue or escape. After defeating his enemies, he carefully examined the surrounding space. A small cell, a corridor illuminated only by a weak, almost flickering light, which created a depressing atmosphere of hopelessness and silence. He cautiously approached another cell located in a narrow corridor, listening for the slightest sounds, trying to gather information about the number of prisoners and possible ways to free them. Inside the chamber, he was approached with curiosity and hope. The people there asked if he was truly the magician from the fire tower, a place that was not just a legend among them, but a symbol of hope and strength. To confirm his words and dispel doubts, Raymond raised his hand and, with the help of magic, released a bright light that filled the space of the chamber, like a small sun in the darkness, giving a signal that there was a true defender on their side. His surprise knew no bounds when he realized that elves were standing before him. Beautiful, mysterious creatures with delicate facial features and pointed ears that rose upwards, emphasizing their unearthly beauty and wisdom. One of the elves, with noticeable curiosity in his voice and a slight doubt, asked if Raymond was really the mage of the fire tower, trying to find out if he could be trusted and whether his help was worth relying on. Raymond immediately realized that it was the emblem that shone on his clothes that had caused such speculation. This symbol was known far beyond the tower, and was recognized by many as a sign of strength and honor. However, he immediately denied his origins, deliberately hiding his true path and reasons for his stay, not wanting to be associated with this place due to personal motives and the complexities of its history. The elf, realizing that the boy's words had weight but still required action, changed his tone, and in a stern but respectful voice ordered his companions to be released from the cage, realizing that this young man could become their true salvation and the key to freedom. Although Raymond had come with one goal, to free these unfortunate people, he was increasingly irritated by the manners of one of the elves, who behaved too arrogantly and imperiously. His tone was cold and unappealing, and every word sounded as if he considered Raymond and everyone else around him to be simply unworthy of attention. This hostility grew with every minute, because the boy felt that instead of support, he was faced with misunderstanding and even condemnation. After all, just by looking at this elf, one could understand that he was not just a representative of his people, but a person of high status and power. In his gaze burned confidence and a slight arrogance that did not allow him to doubt even for a moment that he was right. This caused Raymond quite natural doubts about whether they would be able to find a common language in the future, whether their relationship would not become a constant source of conflicts and misunderstandings. Suddenly, one of the elves, standing a little behind, abruptly interrupted the conversation. Her voice was restrained, but at the same time stern and unquestionable, like a sentence that was not subject to discussion. She ordered Raymond to be quiet and to pay attention to his manners, emphasizing that any disrespect or frivolity was not allowed here. Her words sounded as if she was in complete control of the situation, and she was not going to tolerate any signs of disobedience or defiance. This sudden harsh tone surprised everyone present. After all, this elf always seemed reserved, polite, and wise. But then, suddenly she seemed to change her face. She became stern, even a little threatening, as if she had turned into an unwavering guardian of order and justice. Raising her head and looking straight into Raymond's eyes with ineffable confidence, she firmly declared that the boy was no ordinary human being. but it being far greater and more complex than anyone could possibly imagine. She explained this by saying that the mana flowing from it was of incredible purity and shone with a bright light, similar to warm, radiant sunlight. This light did not simply illuminate the room, but seemed to dispel the darkness, filling the space with life-giving energy, one that not everyone can radiate, much less not every person. Moreover, she sensed something else from him, a unique aroma of the soul, a subtle but deep scent that could not be confused with anything else. It seemed to her a mixture of many lives, experiences, and secrets gathered in one person, as if this young man carried within himself the weight of a past that had left its mark on his inner world. None of the elves present could quite understand what exactly this elf woman meant when she spoke of an ordinary person and the purity of mana. Their looks expressed a mixture of surprise, incomprehension, and even a slight fear, for such concepts were foreign, new, and almost incomprehensible to them. She herself could not clearly explain what she felt. It was something more than words, something deep and unusual, like an invisible energy that emanated from Raymond and was impossible to ignore. This strange smell of the soul, subtle but strong, seemed to call to itself, attracting attention and making one think. Raymond, hearing these mysterious words, was both stunned and interested. He could not understand what these strange metaphors meant and why they aroused such interest in the elves, because for him it was a completely new and incomprehensible world. Suddenly, he noticed that even the elves themselves were shocked. What the elf woman was saying contradicted everything they knew and believed. It was impossible for an ordinary person to have such pure mana and exude such an unusual fragrance of soul. It undermined their understanding of the world and forced them to reconsider their own beliefs. Even Raymond instinctively sniffed himself, trying to figure out the nature of this mysterious smell. But he didn't smell anything special. This only increased his astonishment. How could it be that he himself didn't feel what others saw and felt? At that moment, one of the elves standing nearby turned to him. His voice was restrained and calm, but there was a sense of fatigue, inner tension, and a certain uncertainty in it. Looking at Raymond, he spoke with visible displeasure and even shame, as if he were doing something he didn't like. But circumstances forced him to overcome his own pride and ask for help. He openly asked Raymond to get them out of this dangerous place, emphasizing that it was a matter of life and death that could not wait. The need for rescue was so urgent that all doubts and pride gave way to the necessity of survival. The elf's voice rose sharply, gaining strength and determination as he called out to Raymond, begging him to save them. At the same time, the other elves around him bowed their heads, expressing support and respect for their comrade's words. This surprised Raymond greatly, for elves are known for their pride, independence, and skepticism. But at that moment, they had so calmly and quickly changed their behavior, trusting completely in the simple and sincere request of one of their own. At that moment, it occurred to Raymond that this elf who had spoken first was of extremely high status. Perhaps she belonged to the highest nobility, or even one of the main leaders among her people. Her confidence and authority were obvious and undeniable. Gathering all his magical energy, Raymond directed it at the cage lock and began to slowly but steadily melt the metal. Gradually, the iron began to heat up, turn red, and deform, until it finally became soft and pliable. The head elf, who had been closely watching Raymond's actions, asked with interest and some anxiety whether he had managed to defeat all the pirates and their main leader, hinting at the dangers that had awaited him earlier. Raymond blinked in surprise at the word boss, for the concept was new and unfamiliar to him. He had no idea what the term meant or what role this mysterious figure played in all of this. She began to explain that the leaders in question were no ordinary pirates or guards. Their strength and power far surpassed anything her own people had ever faced. These men were true titans in battle, their abilities far beyond those of ordinary warriors, even the strongest she knew. Their reputation on the seas was legendary, their cruelty boundless. She added that even the most hardy and experienced warriors of her people, who had spent years honing the arts of magic and combat, could not match these leaders. Their power was on a completely different level, fast, unprecedented, and ruthless. That was why this ship and its crew caused her such deep wariness and even fear. While they were discussing this disturbing information, another elf unexpectedly entered the room. His appearance was unexpected, but he immediately showed interest in what was happening inside. His steps were quiet and confident, and the sly smile that appeared on his face added to his mystery. Hearing voices and noise in one of the rooms, he immediately headed there, as if sensing that an important event was taking place there. His intuition told him that this meeting would have significant consequences. Meanwhile, a real battle was unfolding on the deck of the ship. People screamed in pain and fear, their voices were full of despair, but at the same time, a desperate call to fight sounded. Fire, blades, magic, everything mixed in a chaotic dance of death. Yet amidst all this chaos and panic, one of the captains remained remarkably calm and focused. His gaze was piercing and cold, as if he saw something more behind it all, as if some invisible thread kept him in the center of events and gave him constant control over the situation. His armor was more than just armor. It glowed in the darkness with a cold, almost icy blue glow. This glow suggested that he was charged with some powerful energy that made him almost invincible. He looked like a warrior, created not just for battle, but to be the embodiment of death on the battlefield. Suddenly, he took to the air in a high leap like lightning, and in a matter of moments, he had swiftly destroyed most of the fiery warriors who had tried to stop him. Their bodies fell, one by one, leaving only ashes in their place, the ruins of hopes and dreams of victory. After a lightning-fast destruction of his opponents, he headed straight for Daria, realizing that his ruthless actions had already shaken the spirit of his men and caused the first signs of panic. The people began to shout loudly, supporting their captain and simultaneously threatening Daria. Their voices sounded like a raging storm, trying to protect their leader with all their might, words and weapons. However, Daria perceived this only as a light, ironic spectacle. She watched this game of power, fear, and demonstration of strength with a smile, knowing that all these screams and threats were only superficial masks, hiding much deeper and more complex feelings. Suddenly, like an arrow, Daria jumped from a height and landed firmly on the deck. Her landing was precise and powerful. It left no doubt about her determination and steadfastness. Every step she took was filled with an irresistible confidence and power, as if the very earth beneath her feet obeyed her will. She was the living embodiment of strength and power. Everyone present felt a magical aura emanating from her. Her energy made hearts beat faster and minds hold their breath, as if before an important and terrifying event. She stood firmly before the captain, her gaze unwavering, filled with a power that seemed to decide the fate of this moment. The captain immediately noticed how she was closing the distance between them with each step. He could feel the tension she was creating and knew that danger was approaching. From the looks and shouts of those around her, Daria quickly realized that this man was the highest authority on the ship, and that he would not allow himself to be frivolous with her. He introduced himself as Don Cook, the captain of this ship, a man with a stern expression and a cold, piercing gaze that seemed to pierce the very heart. Daria instantly noticed that he was surrounded by an armored aura, a magical protective field that made him nearly invincible in battle. It shimmered with a cold light, like a mirror reflecting any attack. She thought he might have once been a knight. Only such men possessed such strength and abilities. But at the same time, she wondered what he was doing among pirates, for it contradicted her entire idea of honor and valor. Don Cook responded to her thoughts with a loud laugh, explaining that he had not become a pirate of his own free will. Knightly honor, he said, could not feed anyone, did not protect against taxes and the necessities of life. He told of his brothers, the Cook brothers, cruel and ruthless, making more money from the slave trade than any knight could have imagined. It was a harsh and profitable business, and he was a part of it. The words about the brothers made Daria feel anxious and wary. Her intuition told her that these people were much more complex than they seemed at first glance. They were full of dark secrets and dangers. Don, unable to bear the pause, suddenly rushed into the attack. His movement was lightning fast, precise, and ruthless. He sought to destroy Daria with a single blow. His blow flew with lightning speed, like a warrior who wants to wipe his opponent off the face of the earth. But Daria, demonstrating incredible agility and skill, easily dodged the attack. She moved like a shadow, invisible and at the same time deadly dangerous, not giving the enemy a single chance for a mistake. Her speed was simply amazing. She moved so lightning fast that it seemed as if time around her slowed down, and she herself possessed an invincible force that could overcome any obstacles. Her every movement was like a gust of wind, instant and elusive, forcing her enemies to only watch in confusion as she instantly disappeared and reappeared, like a shadow that was always one step ahead. This incredible speed amazed not only her enemies, but also all witnesses of the battle, causing admiration and at the same time, anxiety. The impact she delivered was incredibly powerful and devastating. So much so that its energy pierced the thick deck, leaving cracks in its wake and opening a path through the solid material. This force, like a thunderbolt, tore through wood and metal as if there was nothing that could contain it. The sounds of the breaking wood and the crackling that spread around filled the air with a sense of imminent disaster, making everyone aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary and dangerous. Raymond, turning his head, could not hide his surprise when he heard the characteristic sound of breaking wood. The deck began to crack, and this unexpected crack made him think about the strength of his opponent. His eyes widened, because this sound was a sign that his opponent possessed extraordinary strength and had no intention of giving up or yielding. He felt the tension and danger of the moment envelop everything around him, preparing him for the further, even more fierce confrontation. But almost immediately, another explosion erupted nearby, even louder and more unexpected, like a raging thunderstorm suddenly breaking out in the midst of a calm battle. This explosion swept through the ship, shattering the calm and forcing everyone to look in the direction of the epicenter of destruction. The air was filled with the smell of burning and gunpowder, creating an atmosphere of chaos that instantly engulfed everything around, leaving only fear and uncertainty. The explosion instantly filled the room with a thick white fog that, like living smoke, engulfed everything around it, creating a dense and mysterious atmosphere. Visibility dropped to a minimum, and every step and sound seemed threatening in this impenetrable veil. This fog not only hid reality, but also instilled a sense of isolation and hopelessness, making even the bravest feel confused and vulnerable. Thanks to his own strength and concentration, Raymond managed not only to save himself from danger, but also to protect those who stood nearby. But he still could not understand what was happening and how to overcome this chaos. His mind worked sharply. He tried to assess the situation, not letting panic penetrate his heart, at the same time directing his magical energy to create a protective barrier around himself and his comrades. Every second was precious, and he understood that a mistake could be very expensive. Looking down, he saw that beneath his feet lay long, gleaming spears, silent witnesses to the recent battle, ready to plunge into the fray again. They lay motionless, but their cold shine and pointed ends were silent reminders of the danger that still surrounded them, and that at any moment, a new outbreak of violence and struggle might begin. The man who had caused the explosion could not believe that Raymond had not only survived, but had been able to protect not only himself, but also the others who were hiding behind him. It was a real shock to him. He looked at the young man with a mixture of surprise and rage, realizing that he had faced an unusual and dangerous opponent, who not only possessed strength, but also had stability and calmness in the most critical situations. At the same time, he immediately recognized Raymond as a magician. A powerful magical aura surrounded the young man, and Raymond himself felt the powerful and confident spirit of a knight hanging over him, like the shadow of great feats. This aura was an invisible but tangible field of force, radiating inner confidence and determination, as if he was not just a boy, but a warrior called upon to fulfill an important mission. The chief elf who was watching the events warned Raymond, urging him to be as careful as possible, because the enemy before him was not a simple fighter, but the vice captain of this ship himself. Her voice was quiet, but filled with seriousness and anxiety, which forced the listener to listen to every word. She knew how dangerous and experienced this opponent was, and therefore, the warning was invaluable. This information only added to the tension. The vice captain wielded considerable power and experience, and it was a real challenge for anyone who dared to fight him. His name was whispered among the crew, and his fame preceded him like the shadow of death walking the deck. A fight with him could be the final test for any warrior. The knight, in turn, was confident in his superiority, considering Raymond only a child, inexperienced and weak, who posed no threat to him. His gaze was full of contempt and frivolity. He already imagined an easy victory and did not even notice that the young man possessed extraordinary abilities. However, the knight could not understand why the young man did not seize the moment and kill all the enemies at once, limiting himself to temporarily removing them from the battle. This contradicted his logic. He looked at Raymond as if he were an inexperienced fighter who did not understand the true essence of war. For him, victory was only in the complete destruction of the enemy. For the knight, the only true defeat was death, and he decided to show Raymond how things were done in his world, ruthlessly and to the end. He prepared for the final blow, gathering all his strength and experience to destroy the young magician and prove his superiority. But Raymond himself was no less determined. He was determined to demonstrate how strong and agile he could be, and he was not going to back down. His gaze burned with the fire of confidence, and his mind worked flawlessly. preparing a plan that could surpass the expectations of even the most experienced. In his mind, he began to quickly formulate a plan of action, assessing the situation and looking for the best way to defeat his opponent. He analyzed every move, every step, and opportunity for attack with extreme precision, preparing to exploit any weakness in his opponent. He realized that using fire magic in this environment was too risky. Everything around him, from the floor to the walls, was made of wood, and the slightest spark could cause a massive fire that would destroy everyone without exception. This forced him to look for other options to prevent a catastrophe and save the lives of his allies. So he decided to focus on lightning magic, hoping that this swift and precise type of energy would help him counter the swordsman. He concentrated, feeling the mana filling his body, preparing to deliver lightning strikes with maximum effectiveness. However, the swordsman proved to be extremely skilled. His sword easily deflected the lightning strike as if it were just a weak obstacle in his path. This skill showed that he was not just a fighter, but a true swordsman, able to control any attack and react quickly to danger. However, he could not help but admit that Raymond's intelligence and tactics were at a high level. This young man was quick-witted and not afraid to think, something that was very rare to see in young fighters. This fact made the swordsman respect his opponent, even if he had no intention of giving in. After that, he sharply rushed forward, breaking through the lightning stream that glowed around him like an electric wall, trying to break through the enemy's defenses and break through to his position. His movement was decisive and strong, displaying remarkable strength and fighting skill as he tried to force Raymond to retreat. However, Raymond quickly realized that his usual lightning magic attacks did little to harm his opponent. The attacks simply bounced off or scattered like water on a stone. This made him think that he needed to find new ways to overcome such a strong defense. The swordsman, standing confidently in his place, emphasized that the simple lightning bolts Raymond used were unable to penetrate his defenses and defeat him, hinting that a completely different approach was needed. His words were cold and confident, like a challenge that threw the young mage a new level of testing and demanding a display of true strength. He began to slowly but surely make his way forward, never losing sight of his goal. His gloomy, piercing gaze, in which sinister determination and cold hatred were mixed. Each of his steps was given a dull thud on the wooden floor of the ship, like a harbinger of death, which was slowly but inevitably approaching. His eyes burned with cold fire, like ice cracking under the pressure of force, and in each look, one could read the silence of the coming storm, unwavering and cruel. No matter how Raymond resisted, no matter what spells he used, none of them, created from a single circle of mana, had any effect against the enemy. It was as if the space itself around the vice captain distorted the laws of magic, nullifying every attempt at attack. The air around him became thicker, magical currents blurred, like waves in a stormy sea crashing against a rock. It seemed as if the enemy's dark aura enveloped the space, turning any magical energy into emptiness, making Raymond feel powerless in his own hands. Meanwhile, the vice captain was steadily approaching, closing the distance with every moment, like a predator following the trail of its prey. His movements were concentrated and inevitable, like an invisible chain tightening around its prey. Around his figure, a dark aura seemed to hover, pressing on space and soul, subordinating everything to the will of a ruthless warrior. He swung his sword as lightly as if he were holding a feather, and his eyes burned with a fierce fire, full of determination and contempt. Every movement was precise and deadly, like a graceful tango, where each blow was a step towards the death of the opponent. His gaze pierced Raymond through and through, mercilessly and unmistakably identifying weak points. The blade of his sword deflected each of Raymond's lightning strikes, absorbing the electrical surges and isolating them as if they had never existed. The magic disintegrated into tiny sparks that faded into thin air, and the sword seemed to be made of the very essence of darkness, swallowing light and power. Each repulsion made Raymond feel as if he were fighting, not his body, but time and space itself. Seeing this, Raymond was at a loss. He could not use the power of fire. It was strictly forbidden. So his options were rapidly narrowing. An inner voice reminded him of the rules, the restrictions that he had to follow, and his body was filled with anxiety that the usual methods of struggle had proved useless. Every thought of a fiery flash now seemed an unauthorized luxury that could not be indulged in. While he frantically searched for a way out, Vice Captain Dawn had already begun to methodically strike at his magical defenses, trying to break through his barrier. Each blow was a dull thud that echoed throughout the ship, and the power invested in the blows seemed to be fueled from the dark depths of the fighter's soul. These blows were cold and deadly, like a blade of the coldest metal cutting through life. Each blow was filled with incredible power. A huge amount of mana poured into them, causing the ground beneath his feet to tremble. The air seemed saturated with vibrations that pierced the body and spirit, forcing the heart to beat faster and the mind to hold its breath in anticipation of the next blow. The vice captain's power was not just physical, but magical, capable of destroying not only the defenses, but also the will of the enemy. It seemed that Dawn wasn't even trying hard, but within seconds, Raymond's shield began to crack. Each crack silently told how close the defense was to its final collapse, and a cold fear began to slowly but surely creep through his veins, freezing in his chest and squeezing his heart. Cold fear gripped him from within. He did not know how to withstand this onslaught, because he had to protect not only himself, but also those who remained in the cage behind him. This responsibility weighed heavily, like chains dragging him to the bottom. Thoughts were confused in his head, but he had no right to give up. His mission was much more important than his own fear. He tried to hold on to his shield as long as possible, gritting his teeth, but the cracks widened with each new blow. Every sound of the shield's destruction was like a sentence echoing in his heart, but his will would not allow him to stop, would not allow him to retreat, even when all his strength seemed to be leaving his body. And in a moment, there was a dull crack. The shield broke, and the shining blade of the vice captain's sword cut through space, reaching Raymond himself. The moment was frozen in time. The blade, cold and merciless, was like a messenger of death, and the world around seemed to stop, awaiting the verdict. Meanwhile, a fierce, brutal battle raged on the deck of the ship as the captain and Darius came face to face. The air was filled with sparks of magic, the clang of metal, and the screams of those who still remained alive. It was a real storm raging in the heart of the ship, where every blow and every movement determined whether they would stay alive for another minute. The captain, using incredible speed, broke away, jumped above the deck, and brought his sword down on Daria. But in an instant, her figure dissolved in a whirlwind of burning flames, as if she herself had become fire. Her movements were fluid, like an element that carries and destroys at the same time, causing awe and admiration in all who saw this magic. Turning sharply, he saw her right in front of him, unmoving, with a slight smile on her lips. The captain clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction, realizing that this battle would not be easy, and that before him stood not just a magician, but a warrior worthy of respect and attention. He realized that he was dealing with a true master, Mach. And even acknowledging this, he threw a kind of compliment in her direction, saying that she was simply unsurpassed in jumping. His words were filled with both rage and admiration, because he could see that this woman had a force to be reckoned with. Daria, as if ignoring his words, asked permission to ask the one question that had been bothering her for a long time. Is it true that his brother is also a knight? Her voice was calm, but there was tension and curiosity in it, as if she was trying to unravel the mystery hidden behind the mask of cruelty. The captain only smiled wryly and confirmed, but added that his brother was not as impressive as he himself. There was contempt, pride, and a sense of his own superiority in his words, which made this answer both simple and difficult to understand. Hearing this, Daria breathed a sigh of relief and said softly, "Oh, that's even good." These words sounded like a release, as if she had lifted some of the burden from her shoulders and found peace in her heart. Then she struck her staff against the deck, and sparks flew from the end of it, flying in all directions like hot spray. The moment filled the air with the anticipation of a great power about to be unleashed and change the course of the battle. Suddenly she realized that she had been worrying in vain. Her mana spread around her, entwining everything around her, creating an aura of incredible power. She felt like a source of inexhaustible energy, filling every corner of the world around her and giving her confidence in victory. Raising her staff aloft, she cast her battle spell. Dozens of fiery creatures, resembling small but sturdy men made of red-hot metal, began to emerge from the flames. They came to life under her will, ready to carry out any command and become an invincible obstacle to enemies. These creatures, screaming, rushed at all who were still alive on the ship. Their roar sounded like the battle of hundreds of warriors, and each blow left heat and devastation in its wake. The fiery creatures mercilessly tore through the ranks of their opponents, giving them no chance of escape. The captain, however, did not retreat and rushed straight at the Daria. He saw in these creatures only an obstacle that must be overcome in order to destroy the enemy and regain control of the ship. He perceived her magical creatures as another fire gnome and intended to cut through them to his opponent. His movements were quick and ruthless. He did not give himself rest, risking everything to overcome this barrier. But Daria only smiled and shook her head, denying his assumption. This time, these were no ordinary dwarves. They had a special touch. Her eyes shone with mystery and confidence, and her voice sounded like a harbinger of something terrible and incredible. Her words made the captain wary. He suddenly felt a powerful, almost suffocating flow of mana emanating from these creatures. This energy filled the space, pressing down on him and creating a feeling of helplessness, as if his strength was beginning to melt and his will was weakening. The fire dwarves radiated magic so concentrated that they literally consumed everything they touched, like a living fire that ignited and burned everything in its path. Their presence was like a fiery wave of destruction that knew no pity or mercy, rendering even the strongest defenses defenseless. The captain swung his sword sharply and struck one of the fire dwarves, but instead of destroying the enemy, the movement only caused them to multiply. From one creature, two immediately arose, as if the flame gave birth to new sparks of fire that spread throughout the deck. This amazing and frightening phenomenon made the captain stop for a moment, stunned by this magical trap, which was woven with the most brutal force. Gradually, as he understood the essence of the spell, he realized the terrible truth. The faster and more fiercely he tried to destroy these fiery creatures, the greater their number multiplied, covering him with a wave of ever-increasing fire and magical fury. This hopeless situation seemed to prove that his usual methods of fighting were completely powerless against Daria's magical creation. This terrible phenomenon was part of one of Daria's most powerful and dangerous spells, Dwarves of Hellfire, an art that reflected her ability to control fire not as an element, but as a living enemy, capable of coming to life and multiplying endlessly, obeying her will and reinforcement. Daria's eyes burned with a deep red light, bright as two precious sapphires, combining wisdom, strength, and incredible inner confidence. Her posture was permeated with an unwavering determination and proud majesty that set her apart from the crowd, as if the very element of fire had become a part of her and her invincible ally. The fire dwarves began to literally consume the ship's captain, enveloping him with each of their burning bodies and forcing him to retreat under the relentless onslaught of the magical army. His movements became more and more cautious, and his breathing accelerated, because each step back meant a greater loss of control over the situation. Looking back for a moment, the captain looked anxiously at Daria, and suddenly everything in his mind fell into place. Feelings of fear and respect mixed into a complex mixture, revealing to him the depth of her magical power, which he could no longer ignore. Now he knew for sure that he was not just a simple magical warrior, but a real witch from the legendary Fire Tower, a place about which terrible and majestic legends were spread. However, a question that remained irrelevant sounded in his mind. What exactly made this powerful sorceress appear here, among these scoundrels and pirates? Meanwhile, deep inside the ship, in the narrow and dark cabins, another equally intense battle was raging. A clash between Raymond and the vice captain. There was no room for magic tricks here. Only sharp blades, cunning maneuvers, and ruthless determination remained. The vice captain, despite Raymond's incredible skill, was finally able to break his magical shield. This protective barrier that was designed to protect not only the magician himself, but also those standing nearby, behind his back. However, when the fragments of the magical barrier scattered in the air, the enemy expected to see Raymond weakened or even paralyzed. But instead, emptiness appeared before his eyes. The young man disappeared somewhere from his field of vision. Looking around in surprise, the vice captain noticed that Raymond was on his side, as if escaping from a trap, moving so swiftly that even an experienced fighter could not believe such speed and agility. What surprised him even more was that the young man managed to swiftly repel an attack that seemed to be about to tear him in half. This blow should have been the end, but Raymond defended his life with superhuman strength and determination. The young man enveloped his body in an invisible shroud of magic that greatly enhanced his physical abilities, increasing his speed, strength, and endurance. This moment made a real impression even on the battle-hardened vice captain, who felt that he was facing an opponent of a new level. However, even such efforts did not change the overall situation. Now Raymond was like a cornered rat, trapped, surrounded on all sides by the enemy, and every step could be his last. Suddenly, amidst the roar of battle, one of the elves, the chief among them, addressed Raymond. Her voice, cold and clear, cut through the chaos, forcing the young man to momentarily pause from the fray and concentrate. However, his mind was in complete disarray. No clear decisions or strategies, only confusion and fear of the knight, whose strength seemed unwavering and invincible. Raymond had only seen such an extremely strong opponent once in his past life. Then, in harsh circumstances, he had to face a knight capable of destroying groups of enemies without any pity. Then, this knight single-handedly defeated an entire group of mercenaries, leaving them no chance, showing strength that bordered on inhuman and resilience that was impossible to break. The reason for that bloody conflict was absurdly petty. One of the mercenaries accidentally touched his shoulder, which caused an uncontrollable explosion of anger and rage. Only the accidental intervention of a human magician who sided with the mercenaries allowed them to survive. He managed to confront the knight and equalize their forces. This mage and knight met in a fight on equal terms, each demonstrating their unrivaled abilities that could break even the strongest wills. But that encounter became one of the fiercest battles Raymond had ever seen. A story that left a mark on his memory and heart. And it was then that only this one magician was able to calm the knight's furious anger, stop his storm of destructive power. He did this not through strength, but through cunning, taking advantage of the fact that the knight wore only one layer of armor, which was his only vulnerable point. Recalling this episode, Raymond felt his body fill with determination and inner strength, like a fire burning in his chest. A plan instantly flashed through his mind, and he began to concentrate, creating magical armor that would protect him from further blows. The vice captain, without wasting a second, rushed into the attack again, seeking to break through this defense and destroy the young magician once and for all. The tactic seemed to be working. The shield began to slowly, piece by piece, crumble under the merciless pressure of his powerful blows, threatening to break through the last barriers. But Raymond was not going to give up. Immediately behind the first armor, he created a second, then a third, preventing the vice captain from getting close, keeping his distance and maintaining control of the battle. The vice captain, stunned by such tirelessness and speed of recovery, could not understand how this young man managed to block the strongest attacks again and again, as if having endless reserves of energy. It was truly incredible. With one hand, Raymond was constantly rebuilding his protective shield, covering himself and those behind him. And with the other, he was already forming a huge wind arrow of the second circle of mana, putting all his strength, concentration, and hope into it, preparing to deliver a decisive blow that could change the course of the battle. When he finally gathered all the power of the wind arrow and released it, the air was instantly torn apart by a powerful explosion, rolling in a loud wave, like thunder breaking the silence before a storm. The vice captain flew back a few meters. It seemed as if the shockwave from this magical explosion had literally torn him off his feet. His body first hung in the air and then hit his back hard against the cold stone wall, which dissipated the energy of the impact with a dull, throbbing sound. An expression of pain appeared on the enemy's face. His lips were pressed into a bloody line, and his eyes, previously filled with cold contempt, now wrinkled with sharp discomfort and shock. His breathing became heavy and ragged, each breath coming with extraordinary effort, as if he were suddenly having difficulty getting air, and his chest was clenched in painful cramps. The vice captain, like a seasoned warrior, tried to stay on his feet, but it was obvious that this blow had hit him much harder than he could have expected. Raymond himself was feeling increasingly unwell at this point. Fatigue was rolling over him in waves, and it seemed to him that every breath was turning into a small struggle between life and death. His chest heaved and fell. A sense of lack of air and exhaustion coursed through his body. He felt his strength gradually leaving him, as if the last stream of magic and energy that could still sustain the fight was flowing through his veins. Involuntarily, Raymond's gaze dropped downward, and at that moment, horror gripped him to the bone. Dark red streams of blood slowly flowed from his sides and arms, relentlessly taking away the last drops of vitality. The clothes that had been almost dry just a few minutes ago were now completely soaked in blood, and his fingers were already starting to tremble and lose sensation due to fatigue and dehydration. The feeling of pain was mixed with the fear that everything could end at any moment. But even in such a dire state, when pain and fatigue seemed to ruthlessly control his body, Raymond was not going to give up. With his last strength, gathering scattered fragments of magical energy, he directed his mana at the lock on the cage in which the exhausted elves were kept locked. With a dull crack, the metal yielded to the power of his magic, and the chain suddenly fell to the ground like a broken iron sled. The cage dissolved, and from its darkness emerged the weary but alive elves. Their faces were haggard but full of gratitude. They looked at Raymond in silence, their eyes glowing with a warm light of gratitude. And some even gently touched his hands, as if convinced that this was not an illusion but reality, that they were truly free. This moment filled Raymond with a sense of deep responsibility and hope. Gathering his last strength, he gave a brief but very firm order. If they were able to move, they should follow him immediately, for time was short. But he had not yet taken a few steps forward when an ominous, loud, and hoarse voice sounded from behind them, cutting the air like a cold blade. It was the vice captain. Surprisingly, he had not yet lost consciousness, although he looked as if he were standing on the verge of death. His face was distorted with rage and cruelty, his eyes burned with a real flame of hatred, and his every movement filled everyone around him with anxiety and fear. His aura was almost inhuman. His pupils had dilated to unprecedented sizes, and his entire appearance indicated that he was ready to launch a deadly attack at any second, without thinking about the consequences. Raymond himself was genuinely surprised that his opponent was still standing, despite the near-perfect blow he had delivered in a place that would have shattered even the most steadfast warrior. But the vice captain, as if tempered by iron and fire, proved capable of holding his own even in this grueling battle. Barely suppressing the pain and fatigue, Raymond gave a curt nod to the lead elf, ordering her to gather all the prisoners and quickly climb the steep stairs to leave this dangerous level of the ship. It was clear to him that their safety was now paramount. Not all the elves were happy with his order. Some looked with contempt at the captured humans, considering them an unnecessary burden and not wanting to waste their strength on their rescue. But the head elf, firm and wise, without hesitation, decided to listen to Raymond's every word, trusting him implicitly. The vice captain only laughed in response. His laugh was low, hollow, and ominous, like the echo of distant thunder. And he couldn't believe that anyone would dare waste precious seconds freeing slaves, instead of focusing entirely on destroying himself. Suddenly, he lunged forward, slashing the air with his sword at a furious pace, closing the distance between himself and Raymond with an incredible, deadly determination. His movements were so swift and sure that they seemed almost predictable, as if he were the very embodiment of death. But, although exhausted to the point of exhaustion, Raymond managed to instantly form a magical shield, a glowing barrier of concentrated energy that stood between him and the vice captain, trying to protect both himself and those who remained nearby in this dangerous battle. The enemy's blade crashed into the shield with a loud crack, as if shattering fragile glass, and before Raymond's eyes, the magical protection began to crack, splitting into small, shiny fragments that disappeared into the air. Without stopping for a moment, the vice captain brought his weapons down on the defender again and again, trying to completely break him and leave Raymond without any chance of counterattack. His eyes were burning with pure madness, and his face was distorted by a grimace of wild rage. He acted ruthlessly and relentlessly, not giving Raymond a second to rest, trying to break through the defenses and deliver the fatal blow that would put an end to this fight. But Raymond knew one simple truth. If he fell, those he had come to save would die with him. It was this knowledge that gave him the unstoppable strength to hold on, even through the pain, the fatigue, and the bleeding. At this time, the elves, without wasting a single second, hurried to open the cages, cut the shackles, freeing all the prisoners still on this level of the ship. Raymond only had a short time left to hold out. Just enough time for them all to get upstairs and leave the dangerous place. And then, a few minutes later, one of the elves shouted through the noise of the battle, announcing that everyone was safe and ready to ride. The vice captain froze for a moment, shocked by such audacity and the sudden change in the situation. He found it hard to believe that anyone would dare to change the course of events when he thought victory was almost his. Raymond felt a wave of confidence spread through his body, filling his heart with the warmth and strength he had so lacked before. And at the same moment, everything around him burst into bright, blazing flames, illuminating the dark hold with red and gold light. This unexpected and powerful flame stunned even the vice captain, who did not expect that Raymond, being on the verge of exhaustion, would be able to rise to such a level of magic, capable of changing the course of the battle. Standing amidst the raging flames, Raymond exuded an unyielding determination and courage. He had already made his final decision. This fight would end here and now, and he would destroy the vice captain, no matter the cost.